Good evening and welcome to the October 21st, 2014 Long Meadow Select Board meeting. We'll start with a Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We don't have any announcements tonight. We'll ask, is there any visitor comments before we start? Okay, Richard.
Richard Elias, 608 Frank Smith Road. I'm here to speak on behalf of the citizen petition for the Quint truck for the town of Long Meadow. There are few things that came up at the discussion here that's basically null and void because of the citizen's petition. I believe it's my understanding to be. But I think the people of the town should understand a couple of things. I was talking to the chief, and he says the pumper would be about $500,000, another $250 for the Quint attachment. That means that we're getting 2 fire trucks for all intents and purposes for the price of 1.5. If we just got a regular ladder truck, we'd be losing a pumper, and I don't know whether the station would be suited for a fairly good-sized ladder truck by itself. But we would not have to hire any additional people. There would be no conversion of the station. It would be just to the benefit of the citizens of the Long Meadow. And I ask for the council's support, the select board support, and that of the citizens of Long Meadow when it comes to the town meeting.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Tonight's agenda is going to be solely dedicated to the warrant articles. We're going to be joined here shortly with our...
Other comments?
Oh, I didn't think there were any. Yes, more visitor comments? I'm sorry. Yeah, we shouldn't open visitor comments. No.
This is our turn to talk.
Good evening. I'm Stephen Weiss. In this capacity as chair of the Community Preservation Committee, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. On the behalf of the CPC, I'd like to address the article to authorize an additional $200,000 for the renovation of the tennis courts. I think, like the Select Board, when we learned that the bids had come in so much higher than the amounts allocated by the Select Board and the CPC, we were equally distressed. We held 2 meetings this fall in which this was one of the primary subjects of discussion, and after input from the town, from people in the town, and after some considerable debate, we approved this additional amount by a 5-to-1 vote. We did so for a number of reasons. First, it's a worthy project. The tennis courts are well used by the town, by the schools, and I think everybody agrees they're in serious need of repair. Second, there is a lot of support for the project in town. Third, this is exactly the kind of project for which the CPC funds are intended. And finally, if the CPC allocates these extra funds, it won't cost the town anything else out of the general fund. At the same time, we were concerned about the escalating costs of this project. We're not part of the bidding process, so we don't have much control over the ultimate cost. But we've expressed our hope, if not our expectation, that at the end of the day, the costs will come in significantly less than what has been allocated, so the excess can be returned to the town. I know there's a lot to discuss about this project. We believe it's important that the article be placed on the warrant for the fall town meeting. At that time, the discussion can be had by the entire town, and the voters of the town can decide whether or not to continue to support the project. Thank you for the
Are you going to be around, Steve?
Yes, I'll be around for a while.
Okay, thank you. Any other visitor comments?
Hi, I'm Arlene Miller, and I would like to speak about the tennis court project as well. I'm also a member of the Community Preservation Committee. but my remarks are more as a citizen than as a member of the Community Preservation Committee. I agree with everything Stephen said, the chairman of the Community Preservation Committee. I think this is a very worthwhile project. I think the tennis courts ought to be as part of the high school campus, that's where they should be, and they're in desperate need of repair. What I am uncomfortable with is the amount of money that the bid came in at and the bid process, that is the timing of the bid. I am one of the 5 votes that voted for it on the Community Preservation Committee, and it was probably one of the most vocal in favor of it the night we spoke about it. But I've thought long and hard about it since then, and I work with a lot of towns in Western Mass, and when I speak with elected officials, I always say, what do you think is the best thing you should do? And that's the project you ought to put forth. So I'm going to practice what I preach tonight. And what I think ought to happen tonight is that this should go before the town meeting, but I'm going to work with the Community Preservation Committee. I'm going to ask the chairman to reconvene a meeting with the idea of withdrawing the article at the town meeting floor. I think if they go out to bid at a more advantageous time, let's say January, for a date, a window, Barry says, make it a broad window, see if we can get a bit better price, number one. I think the bid ought to be tiered, 10 courts, 12 courts. Do we really need 12 courts? I'd like to see it come in much closer to the original amount of money that's been allocated. If they're a little bit short, 20,000, 30,000 short of what they need to finish the project after this additional bidding exercise, we can still do this exercise that we're about to do at the Maytown meeting, because we can just put it on a warrant in February in time for the deadline of the town manager. I think this project may have reached a tipping point where the town won't support it, and I think that would be a terrible reflection on the community to not fix those tennis courts to the best of our ability. Do we need 12? I'm not sure. Can we get 12 with a better bid? Maybe. Can we get 10 and get the whole project done? Maybe. So that's just my comment, and I offer it for your consideration.
Okay. Thank you, Arlene. Is there any other visitor comments? Jim?
Can I address the chair?
Pretty well have to address on the mic so that
No, I understand that.
Sure. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Beth Hoff, and I'm going to speak about the changes to the demolition delay bylaw. The proposed changes to the demolition delay bylaw are merely administrative changes and do not change the substance of the existing bylaw. They are proposed in order to address inconsistencies in the existing bylaw. A brief history of the enactment of this bylaw will help you to see why these proposed changes are needed. The demolition delay bylaw was proposed by a member of the Historical Commission at the Spring Town Meeting in 2006. As proposed, the bylaw would have required administration by the Long Meadow Historical Commission. This was recommended by the Massachusetts Historical Commission. In each of the other 132 communities in the Commonwealth that have this bylaw or similar bylaws, the historical commissions of the towns administer them. However, on the floor of the town meeting, the proposed bylaw was amended to require a separate town committee named the Long Meadow Building Demolition Committee to administer the bylaw. The appointees to this new committee were not given terms of office, nor were other portions of the bylaw revised to reassign tasks from the Historical Commission to the new committee. The amended bylaw passed and went into effect. The bylaw is really an emergency measure which you hope you never have to use. It only impacts structures in town that were built prior to 1901, so the antique structures in town. The list of these structures, which is available on the Historical Commission website, includes 162 homes or public buildings, 24 barns, a mileage marker, and a Long Meadow Cemetery. 49 of these homes or public buildings, 8 of the barns, the mileage marker, and the cemetery are also part of the historic district, so are protected under its requirements. Timelines in the bylaw are tight in order to minimize potential delays for the structure owners. If a demolition permit is requested of the building department for one of these structures, the building department is required to notify the building demolition committee. Within 30 days of receipt of this notice, the committee is required to notify abutters, to conduct a public meeting with 7-day notice period, and to make a determination as to whether the owner of the property can immediately demolish the structure. That's a very short window of time to finish all these tasks, so the committee needs to be prepared to act, and act quickly and efficiently and correctly. It's like a fire department. You hope you don't need it, but if there's an emergency, you want it to work well. You know? The proposed changes to the bylaw should rectify the existing inconsistencies in the law. It would bring the committee in line with the other town committees by requiring a staggered terms of office for the appointed members. This is in sections 5, 803A, 1, 2, and 4. It would make the language of the bylaw internally consistent by replacing the term Historical Commission with Long Meadow Building Demolition Committee. As it currently reads, the Historical Commission's doing some of the things, and the Long Meadow Building Demolition Committee is doing some of the other things, and it really should be just one committee doing all of the tasks. It makes it much more efficient. It would also require the committee to meet annually. In order to be able to respond effectively and in a timely fashion to a proposed demolition permit, the committee needs to be prepared to do so. I believe that an annual meeting is a minimum that would be necessary to keep it prepared to act, as the town has charged it to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Selectmen, my name is James Russell, 108 Bel Air Drive, Lower Meadow. I'm speaking on behalf of the Parks and Recreation Department, which I am as chair. The tennis court issue has been a very difficult one for all parties concerned. For the past 2 years, I have babysat the process going forward, touching all departments, etc., to make sure that we had done our due diligence. Through a representative of this town, he recommended to me Gale Associates, who were the design people for the East Long Meadow tennis courts, as well as Springfield College tennis courts, and a number of other courts throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They came in, they looked at our specs, and they tightened them up, added things, etc., so that when we went out to bid, we had good, solid specifications so that we wouldn't kick ourselves in the head after the fact, asking ourselves, well, why didn't we do this or why didn't we do that? The bids came in, and it was sticker shock for me, because I expected that the pricing that we had figured or estimated would work. Well, it didn't, and the bid prices were $150,000 more. I believe part of the difference in the pricing was because we were concerned about getting courts back in play as quickly as possible, that the window of opportunity to construct them led them to go ahead and price them accordingly, considering that they would have to have more people working and they were entitled to a better profit than they would have normally made it. I can't change what came in. I feel terrible about it. I would hope that the town would go out to bid again and see what prices could be brought in with a bigger window of opportunity to complete the job. Parks and Rec is prepared to adjust schedules accordingly. We have the consideration of the high school girls and boys teams that take up roughly 8 courts. We also have Baypath that uses the courts, and then we have the townspeople. So the courts are a fixture in Long Meadow, just like the clay courts are when people drive into town and come down Laurel Street and they see the 4 beautiful clay courts there. It's a difficult decision for you 5 members of the Select Board, but I would respectfully request that you would support the amendment and allow us to go forward and finish this. I sincerely and deeply believe in my heart that the bid prices will come back in much lower and that the monies would then be returned to CPC. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Any other comments from the visitors? Okay, we'll start into our warrant articles. I'll go, Mark and I are going to, Mark and I are going to balance back and forth. Dave, are you going to come up and take the seat of honor with the CFO?
Sure. So it's a duet?
Yeah, the duet.
No, you guys.
Oh, yeah, well, you didn't want to read any,
When you pitch this.
so I pinch it. I've got a cold, too. This is terrible punishment. Article 1, we're set to go. To see if the town will vote to raise or appropriate $142,422 or a greater or lesser sum from the FY15 2015 Community Preservation Fund revenues for CPA fund balance reserves for open space at $47,474, CPA fund balance reserve for the community housing at $47,474, and CPA fund balance reserve for historic preservation at $47,474, or take any other action relative thereto.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that we adopt Article 1 to place on the special town meeting warrant
Okay.
for November 18th.
You have a second?
Second.
Discussion?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Paul.
Paul, we, in the Springtown meeting, we just put money into CPA accounts as well. Is this just a-
In Springtown meeting, we normally take money out of the CPA account. We don't put money in.
This is the assessment we get from the state that says this is what goes in. Each of those
This is
particular line
that
items.
10% matching share that we have to annually provide. And we historically have done it in the fall the last couple of years.
Any other discussion? Call for a vote. All in favor? All opposed? Okay. Article 2, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate a total sum of $210,000 or a greater or lesser sum to the FY15 operating budget accounts for retirement of short-term debt, $200,000, and to interest on the short-term debt, $10,000, or take any other action relative thereto.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt Article 2 for placement in the town warrant for special town meeting of November 18th, 2014.
Is there a second?
Just want to update the board that this article, again, has been kind of discussed ever since we started the budget, that it was my intent to take all the excess levy capacity and apply it towards the debt service of the $940,000 debt for drainage that we authorized back in May. I have been predicting that the new growth was going to be north of $200,000 when I updated the board last Wednesday. Monday morning, Principal Assessor Robert Leclerc came to me and he gave me a new update. And that new update is that our new growth would be in excess of $300,000. So I would propose that the amounts be raised by $100,000. Well, the amount to raise and appropriate would be $310,000 for the retirement of short-term debt, the $300,000 and still $10,000 on the interest. And then that the wording on the explanation be changed to pay not only the debt service on the drainage, but other debt service at an accelerated pace of some of the other outstanding bonds that we have. The 2 other outstanding bonds that we have that are not excluded include the Woodside Drainage Project at William Street, and also the fiber optic program that we put in between the schools and the town.
Thank you, Paul. Any discussion? Go ahead, Paul.
This amount of money was originally the excess levy limit.
Yes, and it still represents the same.
So now we're going to mix new growth, excess new growth above what we were projecting with levy limit, right? So
It's the same. It's the same. It's just that the excess capacity was originally based, when we did the budget last March, there was an estimate of $125,000. That estimated new growth, that allowed for about $170,000 to go towards the retirement of the debt. Okay? Well, that new growth is no longer $125,000. It's in excess of 300. So it's the increase in new growth that is increasing the excess capacity. So it's really this, it's only that the numbers are being updated and they're being increased fairly dramatically at this point in time.
Right, but it's really not, because that was a budget vote. So this is a supplemental budget vote. It's not a warrant article, it's a supplemental, it's not just a warrant article, because at the time, we voted on excess levy capacity, that's stated in here already, now it's 100,000 more.
I'm losing, we never voted that, we never actually voted that excess capacity in the
Sure we
budget.
did.
No, we did not.
That was the very last thing we did at 5 of 11 to approve those projects, to bond them.
Your intent was to absolutely do and follow through, but you will not find any warrant article within the budget that's going to take that amount.
Okay, so now we're going down the road where we're gonna split some hairs. So let's,
No, we
no.
have to have the appropriation. I think what you're saying is that the appropriation was made. I think the intent was to have the appropriation made. The appropriation was never made in the spring. It was always intended to come to the fall, in my mind anyway, when the actual new growth was actually known. So it was, the appropriation was never actually made back in the spring.
Let's go backwards. Budget, the FY15 budget that we're in now.
Yes,
Okay, that's what we're talking about.
correct.
Okay. There was a number given to us at
Yes,
that meeting.
yes.
We voted all of that money. There was excess capacity. Your proposal, the town manager's proposal was to fund these projects by bonding them and using the excess capacity to pay the bonds off, correct?
You folks voted a budget with the understanding that there was excess capacity that was earmarked for debt service. It was only earmarked, and it was never appropriated.
There's an intent
There was an
that we
intent.
voted every single penny of the budget.
Absolutely.
Okay,
There was an intent.
there was the
Yes.
intent, and that was the vote, to vote every single penny of the budget. That was what the board understood when we were voting.
But you did not increase the budget value to utilize that money. You voted a budget amount, but you did not increase the budget value by the excess capacity at that time.
This doesn't circumvent, this is an additional dollars now that we have, that is part of the budget for FY15 that we didn't have back in April or March to vote on. Right. So this is a budget vote. It's not just a warrant article. I just want to make sure we all understand, it's a budget vote, because it's gonna use every single penny again of 100,000 more that's not in the budget, or wasn't in the budget.
Paul, if I could, what I'm interpreting this as saying is that our revenue for the current fiscal year we're in, because of new growth, which people need to know is people putting additions on their house primarily here because we don't have new houses going in, is $100,000 more than we thought it was going to be. It's a total of about $310,000. And you're proposing that we use that additional income to pay off debt that we have already authorized for the town. So we've already, we got the debt one way or the other, so we either pay it off over time, or we use this unexpected income to pay off both, and you've split it up to short-term, I guess for,
Short-term principal and short-term interest.
okay, so that's how you split it up. So you're right, Paul, this is a budget item because we're using revenue that we didn't know we were gonna have, but what we're doing is essentially freeing up payments in future years because we won't be paying
Right.
the short-term debt. So am I fair in saying that this is using revenue that we didn't know we were gonna come in, found money, if you will, hate to use that term, to pay off debt rather than let it stretch on for some period of time?
Exactly.
Okay.
We would accelerate the retirement of the debt.
Okay, I guess the question, I'm not convinced because we're just voting to put articles on the warrant that there needs to be any kind of amendment to what you said. I think, Richard, we're just voting to put articles on it, and I'm not sure that, because the dollar figures, because it says a greater or lesser sum, we could literally put it on the warrant as 210 and actually read it at the town meeting floor as 310 if we wanted to. So-
You can, but I wanted to bring it forward
Right,
today
and-
that in case there are other
Well, I
ideas that you
suggest that
folks
we
wanted
do
to do
change
with
it since that's the current information. But for tonight's purposes, I don't think we need to change my motion.
Okay. Yeah, it can be changed.
My motion was to approve that in Article 2 go in there.
Right.
I mean, aside from pride of authorship.
I have no pride of authorship, so change it.
I would move to amend Article 2 to say 310,000 instead of 210.
Is there a second? Second on it? Okay, we have a second. Any discussion on the amendment?
I got just one bit.
Sure.
I just want the public to know that this board talks about priorities and talks about where we spend our money and what we need money for. And this decision at a late hour of a budget meeting was to max out the levy limit. So instead of saving some money for residents and not spending it because we didn't need it, it was leveraged, and that was a decision that was made. Now there's other money that's been not underestimated, but just a surprise, an extra $100,000, and the board again is going to vote to spend every single penny instead of talking about what are the real priorities in town. Now, this is debt that has to be paid, so it's going to be paid somewhere along the line, but there was a plan, and now we're going to take that plan and say, well, we found some extra money, again, bad word, but extra money came in, additional revenue came in, and we're going to spend it. And I just want to say that, put that out there, because every time we talk about priorities and where the money's going to come from, we spend every nickel that comes in front of us, and it's just, we get in our own way about saying how we're going to fund the priorities, and this is a classic example of where the board is making a decision and information that was just given 5 minutes ahead of time, and we're going to vote for this, it's going to pass, it's going to want to town meeting warrant, it's going to pass. So just understand that when we talk about our priorities, that we're spending them. And I have just one last question. Paul, is that number calculated in the free cash?
No.
That was, no.
No, this will be above and beyond the free cash number.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just, Paul, I just need to, I think that your comments are well taken, Paul, but the alternative is to say, we will not spend this additional revenue in this way, and instead we will tax our residents at $100,000 less when we set our tax rate in November, and carry additional debt moving forward, $100,000 additional debt. So just so people understand, the option, I mean, in theory, I guess, we could not spend any of the $210,000, carry it all forward as debt, because the expenditure's already been made, and cut our taxes the equivalent of $310,000 for the residents of town. So, so Paul Santinello's comments are well taken, that the options are really either spend this money on debt or not tax the people and carry the debt over and pay for it later. But the money that incurred the debt has already been authorized.
Go ahead, Mike.
I'm not sure if you can tell us, but you said you're going to take some of this when pay down on the fiber. And will that decrease the cost for the schools, this upcoming budget?
When you say decrease the cost to the schools, that...
Because don't they pay out of their budget $100,000 on the bond?
It's all debt service, and it's on the town side of the budget.
Oh, it's on the
se.
town. I thought
Right.
it was staying on the school side.
No, it's not in their budget.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Call for vote, all in favor?
On the amendment, right?
Yeah, on the amendment?
Yep.
All opposed? Amendment passes. It's a primary motion. Any more discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Okay.
So passed as amended.
Passed as amended.
My prediction was right.
One for Paul. Article 3.
I should do that with the markets, yeah.
Yeah. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $92,400 or a greater or lesser sum from the FY 2015 water receipts to fund the debt service on the debt authorization for the replacement of water mains on Edgewood Avenue and Glenwood Avenue, as approved in Article 13 of the May 13, 2014 annual town meeting, or take any other action relative thereto.
I'll move that.
Okay, it's moved. Second? Second. Discussion?
Thank you for looking this way.
Any discussion? Okay. It's a private joke between Paul and I. Okay, no discussion. Go for the vote. All in favor? Aye?
I'm going to abstain. It's my street.
Yeah, it's your street. Paul's abstaining.
So
4-0.
401 is
401. Wow, that was quick. Article 4, to see if the town will vote to appropriate, raise or appropriate the sum of $97,900 or a greater or lesser sum from the FY 2015 sewer receipts to fund the debt service on a debt authorization for the North Interceptor sewage design as approved in Article 11 and the Colton Place sewage line replacement as approved in Article 12 of the May 13, 2014 annual town meeting, or take any other action relative thereto.
I move to approve Article 4 as written.
Second? We have a second and primary discussion. Maureen?
Did we put some of the money towards the North Interceptor design before, and this is just we needed to put more in?
No, we actually bonded for that North Inter Design sewer. So this is actually, would be appropriating money to begin to pay off the bond.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Call for a vote. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay. Article 5, to see if the town will vote to transfer from available funds in the Treasury the sum of $650,000 or a greater or lesser sum to the Operational Stabilization Fund, or take any action relative thereto.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt Article 5 for placement on the warrant at special town meeting on Tuesday, November 18th.
Okay, second?
Second.
Second. Discussion?
I'd like to see this article move, I'd like to see this article move later until we can discuss all the other articles. But that's just a suggestion. I'm not going to make a motion
Not gonna
because
make
it
a
won't go
motion.
anywhere.
Paul?
This article was written when we had estimated free cash at $1.4 million. As people may recall, we got our free cash certified at $1.69 million. And it was also written with the intent to follow the Select Board's policy that any excess money above $500,000 in free cash, once the tax rate was set and the budget was balanced, all that excess free cash would go to the Operational Stabilization Fund. Well, because the free cash was certified at a higher amount, this amount should actually read also at a higher amount. It actually should be $946,857. That amount, coupled with the proposed Article 6, would then, when those two are appropriated from free cash, would leave $500,000 available afterwards, which is again in compliance with the Select Board's policy.
Any other, Maureen?
Didn't we take for the October storm money out of the stabilization fund?
The October storm money?
Yeah.
We probably took it from a number of sources. We may have taken some from the Operational Stabilization Fund. We may have taken, I think there are 3 appropriations over the years. Some of it may have come also directly out of free cash. And I don't know if Stephen had sent that, but we did receive the $393,000.
We got that email today.
I'm sorry, what did you say, Mark?
We got an email today that we got $393,000 payment
Right.
toward that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Call for a vote. All in favor?
Well,
Excuse me.
if on the last one we amended the dollar figure, shouldn't we do the same thing here then?
We certainly can. Would you like to offer an amendment?
I guess I'd like Mr. Sturzik to once again, was it 947?
$946,857.
947, 857.
946,857. And again, it was all because of the amount of actual free cash that was certified as opposed to what was estimated at the time of this writing.
Can you offer an amendment, Mr.
Sure,
Ward?
I'll amend it to be $946,857.
I'll second
Second.
that.
Okay, second. Discussion on the amendment? Yes.
Article 6 takes over $250,000 and puts it into OPEB. We just had a vote last night that increases OPEB by 0.25% and 0.25% every year until it gets to 2%. And I know it's suggested in their guidelines, and that's a policy that the board adopted. This article wasn't taken into consideration in that discussion. We did have the warrant, but that amount wasn't taken into the discussion, in consideration when we were having that discussion about increasing the OPEB funding. And I think that, not that we're overdoing it, because I don't think you can overdo something which you have a liability, but we made a policy decision to make this part of the line item budget, which we did, And then we made a policy decision to increase it every year up until it gets to 2%, which would roughly be $1 million contribution per year. I know this amount will help us catch up, but it wasn't part of the discussion last night, and I would rather see that go into this Operation Stabilization Fund than into the OPEB trust. But we're on Article 5. I'm just making a suggestion about taking everything into consideration.
Any other discussion? Let's see, we take a vote on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment? All opposed? Primary motion. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Article 6, to see if the town will vote to transfer the sum of $254,556 or a greater or lesser sum to the other post-employment benefits, OPEB liability trust fund adopted under Section 20 of Chapter 32B of the Massachusetts General Laws as voted on in Article 21 of the April 28, 2009 annual town meeting. Said amount to be taken from the following sources: available funds in the Treasury in the amount of $250,000. Water retained earnings, $611. Sewage retained earnings, $636. Parks and Recreation revolving fund, $1,374. Ambulance fund, $1,935, or take any other action relative thereto.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move that we adopt Article 6 for placement in the warrant of the special town meeting of November 18th.
Seconded by Marie. Discussion?
Richard?
Yes.
I mean, this kind of picks up what we were discussing last night, and when we were discussing the policy, and again, I go back to my question to the auditor when he said there was no material difference between spending, what we were spending on OPEB and zero. And, and considering that we did not adopt a policy to establish a legal trust, I'm not clear what exactly we're accomplishing by putting $250,000 toward OPEB, or to that point, what the difference is between 125 and 250. So I'm not sure I favor this.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'll
Actually, the quick answer is $125,000. Even though
No, well,
that was the quick answer.
that would be the glib answer.
Yeah, that was the quick answer.
I mean, Alex, I'll repeat for the purpose of people who weren't watching last night, what I said is that, when you have somewhere between a $22 and $27 million liability for medical benefits for retirees, which is based on actuarial studies, you're right, $250,000 is not a big deal, but I think that, and I also believe that liability will be altered over time as the state takes action, because we're one of 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts who have liabilities of this size. But the point is that there will be a liability, and whether it ends up being $25 million or $12 million, we need to start working on it. And to the fact that we have free cash, we have funds to do that, sooner or later, we're going to have to come up and pay those funds. If this were a year where we did not have enough funds, or we were making cuts to our budget or to services we were providing the town, I would absolutely agree with you that this isn't a good place to put the funds. But at this point, I think it's as good as any a place to put the funds, given the fact that we will have, and we do have, a long-term liability of millions of dollars in this area. So I'm going to support it. And that represents a change for me over the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I was
when
gonna say.
wasn't
Sure
supporting
has.
this.
I'm getting a little farther away from you. Go ahead, Paul.
It gets back to what are your priorities? And Mark, you've been on record and you have changed because you're the guy who said future dollars are discounted and it doesn't make any difference. And again, when it comes before the board of all these these future needs of the town, and they're 20 million, 40 million, 100 million, whatever the number is, and you keep chucking all this money away, it's into areas you're not going to be able to touch again without the thought. Again, we had a policy discussion last night to increase it, and this wasn't brought up as part of that policy, and I don't think the vote would have been any different, but at some point.
Well, this money is touchable, though. It's not in a trust. It's touchable up until the point that we form a trust. Is that correct, Paul?
Yes, that is
Two-thirds
correct.
vote at town meeting
Right.
can take this money anywhere, right?
Right.
Paul?
I believe they could, yes.
Okay. So until we form the trust, it is more or less liquid.
Richard,
Yes, sir.
can I respond to something Mark said?
Sure.
You know, this spring, we had a debate about full-day kindergarten, and there were doomsday scenarios conjured, of draconian cuts to libraries and other cherished services. And so to me, we are in a situation where, we are making cuts to things that are valuable. We're one of the very few towns in the state that does not have full-day kindergarten that's paid for. It is part of a public education. And so when we, and I know, and I think everybody would agree, that it has value. I mean, everybody on this board would agree that it has value. How much value, we may disagree about. But when I see this, and I see the changing landscape of, national policy, state policy, I mean, we're sort of like a ship that's sort of bobbing on the ocean, I mean, and the only thing we can do is, pay out money. We have very little ability to affect the expenditure side of it. So to me, when I compare something that has definite value to something that has uncertain value, I'm not sure this is the right choice.
Go ahead, Mary.
When I attended that MMA breakfast, the first thing they talked about was OPEB or retirement healthcare obligations. And they said that is the big gorilla in the room. And it does have value. And it's right now, the accounting measures, there's terms for it, are going to change this year. And more of this is going to be put on our books, and it is going to affect our bond rating. And we had very, very stern warnings brought to us that this is what's coming down. Whether Beacon Hill moves forward and actually makes any sort of changes or not, we have a primary responsibility to address this. And I don't ever want the conversation to be whether we're going to give all-day kindergarten to children or we're going to pay for our retiree health care benefits. And I feel that this is all budgets have many variables. This is a very, very important part of our budget. And from what I understood is the steps we've taken from line item to now a funding method and putting a amount in here is going to be very important for how we are going to be viewed by the financial industry out there and how we're going to be looked at when we go out to bond. And as I said yesterday, I think it also is a moral issue that we have made promises. We need to sit down and we need to decide how we're going to move forward. And if we need to make changes in the law, then we have to start advocating for it. But I feel this is a really important part of the budget, and I think it is something that we do have to put as a priority in our budget. And I was very pleased yesterday when we sat down and we did make a policy going forward. How much is this going to make a difference? All I know is that we have people retiring every day, and those costs fortunately have dropped this past year because we worked very hard at Scantic Valley. But each coming year, those costs start increasing more and more. And this is a way we're going to protect the town from layoffs, which are going to be coming in the future. That's what we were told. Until you get this under control, and this will be something that has to be done with Beacon Hill and the towns. But I feel this is a really responsible move, and I'm pleased the warrant article's there. So I will be voting to support this warrant article.
Good.
I'd just like to make a comment that it's, gee, we cut kindergarten, all-day kindergarten, and yet we're funding OPEB. The reason that we have money to fund OPEB is because the school committee has turned back, the number's $475,000, I believe, this year. So the school committee had the chance to fund kindergarten before we even got this money here, and they chose not to. And as the elected officials in charge of determining the priorities in the school department, if they chose not to do it, I feel no obligation to do that. My obligation lies with fiscal responsibility of the town, which is to begin putting money aside for our long-term liabilities. So that's my take on this.
Paul?
in all fairness to Alex, this board talked about cutting library hours, counts on aging. This board talked about it if the school committee came to this board to fund all-day kindergarten. So, and they didn't. So let's just be straight with it, that it was this board that brought up those things about what we were going to cut if that was going to come before us. And had the town manager, I believe we gave a directive to prepare those cuts in a 30,000-foot level, I believe.
It was in the context, just to clarify, it was in the context of a town meeting citizens.
Correct.
Anticipated citizens amendment. So the school committee worked with the select board in terms of crafting the budget and making sure all priorities were funded. It was really in preparation for a town meeting vote or an anticipated town meeting amendment, and the school committee actually opposed the amendment.
No, I understand, but it wasn't, there was this board that talked about those particular cuts. So like I said, I just said it straight. And again, every vote has a meaning. So what this says is that this is a priority over a DPW facility. This is a priority over other things that you need in town. So vote it, it's going to pass. But my point to you guys is that when you come back and say we now need to do an override or debt exclusion for X number of dollars, remember all the extra 100,000 for the debt service we just found, and understand that all of these votes have a consequence. Because I think that's the part we're missing.
Okay. Call for a vote? All in favor? All opposed?
There we go.
Okay.
Yes,
3-2. Article 7, to see if the town will vote to transfer the sum of $200,000 or a greater or lesser sum from the community preservation undesignated fund balance to the Blinn Tennis Courts and Lighting Project, or take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Martell, I had a conversation with you prior to the meeting on CPA-type requests coming through.
Yes, I heard today that this might be an issue. I looked at the Community Preservation Act for the legal buffs out there. That's section, section 5, paragraph B2, which says that the Community Preservation Committee shall make recommendations to the legislative body for the various types of projects that can be funded through community preservation funds. So it says the Community Preservation Committee shall make recommendations to the legislative body for those different things. And the legislative body is defined in the Act as the town meeting. And so as I read that, that's mandatory language that their recommendations shall be made to the legislative body, the town meeting, through the vehicle of the warrant. And I should say that language, which I just cited to you, is carried over to the Long Meadow General Bylaw, Section 2-808B2. So.
Sorry, could you give us those sites again, Dan?
Yeah. It's General Laws, Chapter 44B, 44 capital B, Section 5B2.
And then the bylaw?
And B3. That also talks about the Community Preservation Committee may include in its recommendation to the legislative body a recommendation to set aside later funding. So that one was discretionary, and the town bylaw is 2-808.
I'm sorry, say it again, bylaw?
2-808.
2-808.
B.
B.
I have it here.
Do you have a copy?
Sure. Do you want both of them?
If you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. I can have them back when you...
Absolutely.
Discussion? No, anybody have a comment?
We probably ought to move to place this on the warrant.
Yeah, we can move place it on the warrant, but do we even need a motion to place it on the warrant?
Well, wait a minute.
Well, who places on the warrant then? I thought we had this discussion last year.
Okay, we did, but I don't remember us voting on the CPA projects to put them on the warrant.
Of course we did.
Oh, I don't remember it.
No,
That's been a year.
Remember all the emails that we got about, should we put the fields I mean, the tennis courts, we
Right,
debated
it's-
that very thing.
Right,
I mean,
it's a pass-through though at this point. It's not for our debate on
There's
where the
town money
issue
in
is
that warrant
on.
article, though.
But that was prior approved. I agree with you,
Wait a
Paul, there
minute.
is money.
But, wait a minute,
This warrant article right here is for $200,000 from the CPA fund. And we have no choice but to approve it.
Or to put it on the warrant.
Or
I
to
say
put it on the
it
warrant.
needs to go on the warrant.
yeah, I'm
He's
sort of
treating
blown
it like a
away at
citizen
this point
petition.
because we haven't, I mean, you guys have been on it, every year you vote on whether to put CPA projects on the warrant, right?
We have.
Right.
And
Doesn't mean
so,
it's right.
does that, are you saying
doesn't mean
this
it's right.
practice has been
Well, I would
illegal?
say, I say that would be concerns with these Community Preservation Act if you chose not to put it on the warrant, but that's not something that's happened.
Where's, I don't know, you've handed, I don't know, this section is the definitions, do you have the language?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That was just a definition for purposes
Right.
of what the legislative. Now, I have not checked with the Department of Revenue or anybody else, for that matter, because I looked at the statute, and it seems clear to me. Now, whether there's any gloss on that, I just don't know.
You mentioned that in reading that from the Mass General Law, that they shall make recommendations to the
Legislative
legislative
body.
body. Because Alex is reading it and I don't have it. So I wanted, the clarifying question I have for you is that shall make a recommendation to legislative body.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Does it say, since we have 2 town meetings, that it has to be whenever they make it? Is that what the statute is saying? That,
It doesn't distinguish between whether
but
it's the
as long as they
annual or
propose an
special.
article,
to-
and again, because we have a warrant that's open,
Right.
then it's inferred that it should go on because it's an open warrant regardless of,
I have some history on when the warrant is open and closed, going back to last May.
right.
But I'm assuming right now that this warrant is open.
Well, no, but it's,
We closed it last night.
Okay.
But it
did
is-
you-
No, but it
did-
included that, but I'm just saying, right.
did-
yeah.
Right.
There's within.
Okay.
But my point is that
Non-issue.
we have a town meeting coming up. We talked about it like with citizens petitions. We have a town meeting coming up. If the citizens petitions make the deadline that we've established, they go into it. And then Richard explained that if, there's a citizens petition, for example, that came today and the warrant's closed, if we reopen it in 2 weeks, for example, because we reopened it, it automatically goes on. So the law might not say it has to be on this particular meeting, but because it's been submitted, the interpretation is there's a meeting, there's a warrant, they submitted an article.
I mean, they're in the legislative, that they're entitled to
Right,
be
okay.
heard. I
Right.
mean, the legislative body is how
Well,
else, I guess, how else would they get to make a recommendation to the legislative body other than through an article on the warrant? I guess that's what it
Right,
comes
what
down
I'm just
to.
trying to, because you said that they shall go to the legislative body.
Right.
It doesn't say they shall be placed on the warrant they want to be placed on. And what I'm asking you is that it's inferred that
Well,
since it was a warrant,
I'm not going to get into that.
No?
I know
Okay.
it says that they shall report.
and I'm not arguing it.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just asking
Okay,
a question that, with the
Okay.
absence of saying when the meeting is,
okay,
it's telling us that it's there.
right.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Should we have a motion to accept the legal opinion that these CPC articles
Whatever your
need to be on the
pleasure
warrant?
is, if you need a motion to accept the legal opinion, I mean, we've never had a motion to accept legal opinion before.
What
It's
do we
just
accept
legal
on
opinions
an article
rendered
that
to
we
the
can't vote
board.
on?
Pardon?
We would accept the legal opinion on an article we can't vote on?
I don't understand your question.
So if we can't vote on it, if it's
Yeah.
on there, then why do we need to accept the legal
Well,
opinion?
we don't.
Thank
Well,
you.
we-
That's
we-
what that's-
we-
I waive my rights to have you accept my opinion. Right.
So we don't need to put
Yeah.
a motion on the floor for this.
Yeah, I mean, can I follow up? So, I wish I had had more time to sort of consider this, but I think the analysis is wrong. I passed out for everybody's benefit, and I think I saw Stephen hand you statutes
I was
that.
not in statute.
Oh, you did, all right, so.
The
I'll-
Community Preservation Act?
No, this is a different one. And we've discussed it. This is 3910. So you probably know that well.
It's not, well, certainly better now than I did a few months ago.
Sure. So the, and this sort of gets to the other question. The section, when we discussed this last
So we're talking
spring,
about 3910?
10. It's a few pages
Yeah,
back.
sure.
And I even highlighted the section. So the language talks about when the selectmen shall insert in the warrant. Okay, those have to do with citizen petitions. That's when, and that was the subject of what we discussed last spring. We had no discretion in the matter. Just like when we were considering the zoning proposal, whether to pass it on to the planning board, shall. So we had to do it. There's no shall language relating to any other type of warrant article in 3910. So I assume your analysis would be that section 44B, chapter 45B, section 5 amends 3910, but does not do so explicitly. And, you know, it's a principle of statutory construction that those types of inferences are not normally drawn when it can be interpreted otherwise. So when I see this language about the Community Preservation Committee shall make recommendations, I mean, there's no reference to warrant articles.
No, and I'll admit that.
Right. So, I mean, so when we're drawing an inference to circumscribe a power that is otherwise clear, I don't think the analysis is correct. So, just to further the point, so the language that you've cited, shall make recommendations, it's possible to read that is shall make recommendations when those things are on the warrant. I mean, it doesn't say one way or the other. And that reading gives that language force, so it does not render it a nullity. That would be a problem with if my interpretation were adopted. I can't have anything that would render statutory language a nullity. So it gives that language meaning, but also sticks to the principle of statutory construction that you do not inferentially overrule other laws unless it's done explicitly. So I don't know, what's your response to that?
I think it's also a principle of statutory construction, that statutes are to be interpreted so as to be a coherent whole. And I think that it's not inconsistent with that principle to say that the shall language with respect to recommendations of the Community Preservation Act is what it is, and that
no, I understand but
that isn't within the purview of the Select Board to decide whether or not the Community Preservation Committee's recommendations are to be heard by the town meeting. I mean, otherwise, the Community Preservation Act's plan, which by statute they have to come up with, would be at the mercy of the Select Board and whether the legislative body, the town meeting, gets to vote on it. And I'm not sure that follows.
So here's my question. I mean, you've been town council for
36 years.
36 years. And this is the first.
Does that give me any more flexibility?
Well, no, I guess my point, no, I mean, my point is that if we've followed a practice for 36 years and you're now bringing it up.
I didn't bring it up. I mean,
well, I know, but surely you've known that we've voted on CPA projects all these years.
But I mean, if you have voted to put them on the warrant, I've never had the need to look at subsection section 5.
Oh, but actually 2 years ago things were actually rejected.
Well, I didn't know that,
relating
and
to
I
the Wolf
wasn't
Farms Fields.
asked to opine on that.
I don't know. To me, you're talking about a sort of core power of the select board.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree that
I would
setting
agree
the
that
warrant
setting
is
the
sort of
warrant
like
is
a
core power?
core power? And there's nothing that says we have to put it on the warrant. In fact, this statute doesn't refer to warrants at all. I mean, this seems dead wrong to me. I mean, that's a different question of whether it's a good idea to have these projects.
I'm not even talking about that.
And I understand that. I mean, just so that people understand where I'm coming from, because I think last spring I voted for all the CPA projects, but to sort of to interpret that this power does not exist through this process of inference, when there's a possibility to read it not to circumscribe this core power and to give the CPA statute meaning, it seems wrong to me.
So how, in your view, would a Community Preservation Act project find its way to the legislative body if the selectmen won't put it on the warrant?
Well, it may or may, I guess what I'm saying,
So
you're
saying
right.
they would have to do a petition article?
Well, they
put it
could,
on?
but all it's saying is they shall make recommendations. So, that could
If
mean.
you read on, though, recommendations, and then it itemizes the various types of projects for
Right.
which Preservation Act money can be spent. And
Right.
they make recommendations about those. I mean, I'm not sure we're making progress here.
No,
so,
but I guess,
I'd like to make a recommendation, because I really don't think we are making progress. And I think
Well-
you've likely got a very valid point, but I'm not sure this is the time for that discussion.
well, this is when we're having to vote on it.
Well,
And we're
we can put-
adopting, I mean, we're trying to
I can
debate.
shelve this one item and move on down through. I mean, we can open and close, we've got enough time to open and close this before we have to go to print. When is our print date?
It has to be done by on November 3rd, because it has to be posted on the 4th, which
Okay,
is 14
November
days
3rd. So
prior.
And we've got room for another couple of meetings between now and then, if need be. I won't be here, I'm leaving Thursday, and I won't be back until November 3rd. So certainly I can see,
Hmm.
Will you be in town on November 3rd?
Oh,
I will be in town on November 3rd. Okay.
Oh,
That's a Monday, right?
Yes, and
that would be our next scheduled meeting. It needs to be in print on that time?
It needs to
It
be,
needs to be signed and posted on the 4th.
On the 4th, so we could resolve this one issue if
Well,
it needed more research.
Let me suggest this. I mean, maybe there are people who are waiting for my opinion before they vote, but if there are 3 members of this board who want to put this article on the warrant, they can put it on the warrant, and then Mr. Grant and I will save our discussion for another time. But I think it's something worth resolving, but it doesn't, I don't know
We
whether,
don't vote on the article.
pardon?
You just said we don't vote on it. That's what I'm saying.
No. I'm saying that it goes on the warrant. I mean, whether, what sort of procedural nicety you use, it's, in my view, it should go on the warrant so that the legislative body has a chance to hear from the Community Preservation Committee.
So if the board can't vote against it, then the board
You're
can't
next.
vote for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, come on, you can't have it both ways.
I'm not sure
Well, that's what it says. And I'm not arguing with you about whether it should be on. If you're saying it should be on it, you're citing statute and law. I mean, the fact that we got it right now is bothersome, because if it was thought of that we were not going to put it, I'm assuming you got a call from either the select board chair or the town manager say, be prepared for this
Yes,
tonight.
I did.
And I'm disappointed that we didn't have that ahead of time, so maybe some of Alex, you could have read it and had questions.
Mm-hmm.
That's not your fault, that's our side of the equation. And so it obviously lends to confusion, because as Alex said, we have historically voted on all of these articles, including
Okay.
CPA articles.
Marie?
No.
No, let Marie, she's had her hand up.
Yeah, we've
for-
had people shouting out and not being declared by the chair.
Oh, Just speak.
I agree with your analysis. I totally disagree with Mr. Grant's analysis. I feel the intent of the law, the intent of the CBC statute was that there was going to be an independent group that would be making the decision. This was not part of the general funds. that was special CPC fund, and there was a special way that this group was pulled together, and it does say shall, and shall is really important. So this board last spring voted and decided not to take the legal opinion of Attorney Martell, and so I would like to put a motion on the floor to accept Attorney Martell's legal opinion in regards to the placing of CPC articles, specifically this piece CPC article on the warrant. And that's my motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, discussion?
Well, first of all, I don't know if we got this last spring, so I think that might have been a misstatement. But secondly, you just got it. And have you read it, Mark?
Read what? Mr. Martell's opinion? I've heard his opinion. I haven't read that's the statute. It's not his opinion, but we did get an email from him.
Well, that was on the zoning article.
Yeah. Can I just make a comment on the process, if the board wishes? Because I understood, the call was from me, and we were talking about the warrant generally, the preparation of it, the administrative functions, and when I had understood that the issue of planning board articles was going to be raised by Alex, it had never, quite frankly, never occurred to me before, but I thought, geez, this may be somewhat related to that general discussion, although set up differently under Massachusetts general laws. There still is an independent body statutorily authorized, the CPC, Community Preservation Committee, and then this whole issue of what goes on the warrant, what must be on the warrant, where is the select board's discretion? And I certainly don't know, and to be honest with you, after 300 years of town meeting, I'm blown away that these issues aren't more solidly defined. But the only context in which this was raised was, if we're going to have a discussion about the planning board, this seems to be related to that. So that's the only reason why I raised the issue.
Okay, we had a motion to accept legal opinion, which we've heard.
Yes.
Not read, and it was second part.
Could I have comment?
Sure.
So,
Further discussion.
I would like an opportunity to look at this further and provide that to the rest of the board. Provide my analysis.
Okay. That does not circumvent us accepting this opinion or voting on that opinion.
Well, I mean, all right. I mean, I guess you didn't want to hear the back and forth,
Right.
and you don't want to hear a sort of a more considered back and forth.
What I was hoping to do
So-
was to provide you, if you needed time, I was prepared to bypass this item and leave it till November 3rd meeting, if you
Well,
needed time to research.
Well, that's what I would
Or
support
we can
that.
put it on, we can vote it on, and you can brief us at the November 3rd meeting, too. We will have one more meeting, and we can open up the warrant. I mean, if you should discover something, and you and Attorney Martell come to the conclusion that, in fact, we have made a wrong choice, I would like to know before we go to the town floor.
So I think your inclination is correct. We should wait until November 3rd on that.
We can leave that one item open, or we can
Right.
close it and reopen it on the 3rd. I don't think it matters one way or the other.
I'm not withdrawing my motion.
Okay. You withdraw your motion?
I've said I'm not.
Oh, okay, well, that's fine.
Yeah.
You don't have to. We can
It's at
vote on it.
7.
Then your motion was again?
My motion was
off
to
at 7.
accept Attorney Martell's legal opinion in
Quarter
regards to
called into
Article
play, but-
7, whether it should be placed on the warrant.
Okay, but that still does not, okay, we'll vote on that. All in favor? All opposed?
Well, then, if we have to vote on the article itself, because we're refusing to accept the legal opinion that we do not have the power to not vote on it, then let's just go ahead and vote on it.
I was proposing to, is there a motion on to vote on? There was a motion and a
I'll move we
second.
place Article 7 on the warrant for consideration by town meeting on November 18th special town
Okay, is it
meeting.
seconded?
Second.
Discussion? We're right back to where we were.
I think you were right in saying defer it to November 3rd
I do too.
and work it out, and, because either we vote, because if you can't vote against it, you shouldn't be voting for it. Because if it's a submission by CPC, and if it's the same thing with the planning board articles, you're voting on something, you're endorsing the article, in other words. So Richard was right in saying defer it. You're not saying it's not going to be on there, because if it ends up being that's the case, the legal opinion is the legal opinion, then it's on there automatically. If we're going to take, then I'm just saying, I think you're right. So if we're going to have a discussion on the article, let's have at it then.
Go ahead.
I think the motion is to place it on the town warrant, and to me, that means turning this over to the citizens of the town of Long Meadow, who are the legislative body. You know, what we're trying to do here is to make an end run around the town meeting by deciding at a body of 5 whether or not this should go on town meeting. I personally am very, very concerned, as we heard from Mr. Weiss, Ms. Miller and Mr. Russell about the cost of this. And at town meeting, I'm not convinced I'm going to vote to spend more money on this project. And I certainly hope that Ms. Miller's recommendation that this be withdrawn on the town meeting floor is followed up with. On the other hand, I think the residents of the town of Long Meadow need to understand what's going on with these tennis courts, the escalating cost of the tennis courts, and the uncertainty and where the money's coming from. And I have every belief and expectation that they'll understand what's doing and take an action that's appropriate for the town. So I'm voting to put this on the warrant and let the people in the town of Long Meadow decide what they want to do with their $850,000 in tennis courts at Blinn Park. And I it has nothing to do with whether we must or shall or anything else. It's let the people decide.
I agree. Marie? Both of you guys had your hand? Go ahead, Marie.
I, again, always believe it should go to the legislative body and let the people decide on what they want to do with the tennis courts. It is the central part of the town. This is a tremendous amount of money. It's a lot of money CPC for years has been putting away, preparing for this, and I think they should have the right to state their case. And I strongly believe that according to statute, they have the right to state their case. But our form of government says, in my opinion, it should go in front of their people. And so I will be supporting the article.
So that was your same opinion you had last time?
Exactly.
Okay. So we've heard your opinion twice.
That's right.
Go ahead.
So, let me just say, I support the tennis courts. I support the scope of them. I supported them last spring. The concern that I have about this particular article is that we would be spending $200,000 extra for a reason that I don't think is very good, which is I think it was a failure on the part of our town government to send the bids out so late, such that the costs escalated, and as told by our town manager, a number of bidders simply didn't bid because they didn't think it could be done in time. That makes me, and just to be very clear about this, I believe it was voted on May 9th, and then it was the end of August when it went out to bid. So there was 3.5 months of our critical building period that nothing was, no action was being taken on putting this out to bid. I understand we were preparing it, but my view is that this is kind of a systemic failure of town government, that we should be prepared very soon after a vote on town meeting floor, given that we're in a state where nearly 6 months of the year is not building, and then to use 3.5 those months where building simply cannot take place. What I think we ought to do, and I think probably everybody would support this, is to put it out to rebid, and hopefully it will come in at the original price. And if at that point it doesn't, I would support next spring adding whatever money is necessary to complete the project. But which is, I think, pretty similar to what Ms. Miller was talking about.
But we can't change the, I think I can answer, we can't change any of that. That's a secondary issue.
What?
The Warren article has been presented as for $200,000.
I know.
We're not in a position to alter that.
No, I'm saying is I'm not supporting it, but I'm saying that if after we rebid it, because we're going to rebid it whether we get the 200,000 or not, right? We're going to try to see if it can be done.
That's correct.
And if it can be, then everybody's happy. If it can't be, for whatever reason, then in the spring, we can add whatever amount necessary. That's where I am on it.
30 seconds.
Thank you. 30 seconds. Well, what really happened was the timeline, it's not accurate to say that it was a failure of town government. The bids went out. We did take about 2 extra weeks to have them peer reviewed by the Gale Associates, the specialist that Mr. Russell referenced in his comments. And the timeline that was tough for the bidders to make was doing the courts this past fall versus next spring, and that was a requirement of the bid because based on largely the school's tennis schedule, the spring is a very difficult time to build the courts. That was really the driver of the lack of competition. The bottom line is, based on our estimates and the analysis of Gale, we thought we had a $675,000 project. We don't. We have an $875,000 project. And a lot of that was due to unavailable information about the cost of the lighting and putting in conduit, some materials costs that were higher than we thought they were going to be based on market competition. So we thought the courts were going to cost us a certain amount. It turns out through the bidding process we found out it was a different level of project. It's not a failure on timelines or anything else, and I really think that conveys a false impression to the town.
Okay. You took more than 30 seconds.
Can I just respond to that?
Paul was next.
I'm sorry.
Since this has been brought up for discussion, since there's been a motion, a year and a half ago, I'm not going to vote for this because I think Richard was absolutely right that you should wait till November 3rd and everybody can unknot their shorts and relax and whatever. But a year and a half ago, the Community Preservation Committee assured the town that this project was going to come in at $500,000. That's the warrant article number 22 at the May 2013 meeting. $180,000 had been allocated. There was $120,000 of CPC money or CPA money, and as this project was going to be, and it include everything that we see in the same article today. And not only did it go from $500,000 to $675,000, it's now gone to $875,000. And I have no faith in the process, because if you guys vetted it out, you guys got up and spoke and talked about what you've done and so forth. If you vetted it out, then it was a bad process to vet it out, because it went from $500,000 a year and a half ago, now it's at $875,000. And the CPA money, while there is a match from the state, it is still taxpayer money, the initial part of that, and there is matching from the state. So that 0.25%, I think it is, and that number is not correct me, but that the initial amount that qualifies us for the matching money comes out of your property taxes. So to say that it's at no cost to town residents is also a misnomer. But I don't see how a project goes from $500,000 to $875,000 in a year and a half, and we're going to sit here again and tell residents that this is it, this is the bottom line. So since we've opened it up for discussion, I think that's something that we should be talking about at some point in time.
I think Alex was next.
That's correct. This is just real quick. I mean, the language in the warrant article says that the aggressive timeline for construction, among other things, were major factors in the higher than anticipated bids. And the explanation that we received from the town manager some weeks ago, and I'll pull this up off of YouTube because anybody can listen to it, was all about the timeline. And the fact, and you're right, I mean, we were trying to get it done in the fall, but if you're trying to do it in the fall and you don't put it out to bid until August, obviously that's a crunch. I mean, if we put it out to bid so that we do it next year, then the timing factor gets removed.
10 seconds. It went out to bid in July, and the timeline led to reduced competition, which yielded, in all likelihood, higher prices. That should be clear on what the causality is there.
Wait a minute, you're saying July now?
It was the bids were advertised. The bids were out on the street, if you will. The bids were available at the end of July, like July 25th or something like that. And again, tight timeline. There were certain that we thought we were going to get maybe half a dozen contractors to bid on it. We only got 2, and we believe that the lack of competition drove up possibly the bid price, and that's one of the reasons why we want to rebid the project, regardless of what happens here.
Okay. And then I'm going to raise my hand. Go ahead.
Everybody right there, raise your hand. Mr. Santinello, your comments are absolutely dead on. I agree with you 100%. With one correction, is that community preservation funds do not come out of your taxes. They are supplemental to your taxes. They're added on above our taxes. It's an extra 0.25% if I'm correct. But
Can you say that again? Because I see it on my property tax bill that I pay.
Right, but it's the tax rate we set, and then there's an extra 0.25% added on.
But I still paid it.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
but it's
okay.
supplemental to your tax. Oh, yeah, we all paid it. So I'm not arguing with you, I'm just saying, I think that the arguments Mr. Grant made, that Mr. Santinello made, are phenomenal arguments to make at a town meeting. And I got to believe that town residents hearing those arguments will act appropriately, and so I'm at this point, I'm going to let you, I guess I'll let you speak, Mr.
Okay.
Foster, but I'd love to see a vote on this.
We'll have a vote. All the comments are wonderful comments that'll be made at town meeting, I'm sure. My problem, my only hang-up is the fact that we have time to allow that one legal issue to be resolved. And if there's any concern on it, I think sounds like there's some concern, at least by one board member that wants to have some time to research that. And we can close this article and reopen this thing on November 4th. We've got time for one more meeting.
But it's only an issue if it fails to muster the 3 votes to get on the warrant. You can
That's
put it on
true.
the warrant and still do the legal analysis and then not have to address it again on November 3rd.
And the fact is, if Mr. Martell is right, we don't need to vote on this issue. So this issue automatically be put on the warrant without our vote. So our vote at this point may mean absolutely nothing.
But at least if it passes, it's on the warrant.
But it'll be on the warrant, because we have October 4th. We have one more meeting to get this issue resolved. Or October 2nd? No, November 4th. 3rd. Right. November 3rd. And that was the point that I tried to make before, is that we do not have to make this decision tonight, although we've already spent a considerable amount of time debating this issue and got way off balance into things that are going to come up at a later date, I'm sure. So I'm prepared to let this issue float until our next meeting. And that's I'll be voting accordingly.
Wait,
Oh,
there's a motion on the floor.
There is a motion on the floor, and we're ending discussion. The motion was?
To accept Article 7.
Place Article 7 on the warrant.
Okay. All in favor? All opposed? Article 7 is done. Article 8, to see if the town will vote to reduce the amount appropriated for the town's response to damages incurred during the storm of October 29th/30th, 2011, voted by the Select Board on November 21st, 2011, under the authority of Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 44, Section 8, 9, from $11,879,750 to $11,026,000, or take any other action relative thereto.
Chairman, I move that we approve the placement of Article 8 on the special meeting town warrant.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion?
Can I just ask one quick, the
Yeah.
email we got today about that additional funding, does that affect this article in any way?
It does not affect.
Okay.
Any other discussion? All in favor? All opposed?
Mr. Santinello?
Yes, I'm sorry, but that was a yes.
Okay, this is one of the long ones. I hope we don't have to read this whole thing.
You don't have?
No, we don't have to.
But
Article 9, to see if the town will vote to amend the following Section 5-319 dog license penalty of the general bylaws of the town or any other action relative thereto. And effectively, effective January 1st, 2016, to change the penalty from $15 to $30 and to change the date of imposition of such penalty from 60 days to 30 days and due date, so that as amended, Section 5-319 would read as follows, and then there's a penalty of $30 shall be imposed after written notification to the dog owner, and an annual fee is added to any other basic license fee for any dog license purchased more than 30 days after the due date. Said penalty to be retained by the town. Yes, sir.
I'm not going to make a motion to place this on the warrant now, and I'm going to say why. Although I strongly support this amendment to the bylaws, but I've been on the board for a while, and I have heard over and over again that in November 18th, we're having a special town meeting. We're not having an annual town meeting, and I believe that articles that change our bylaws ought to be reserved for the annual town meeting and not take place at special town meeting. A special town meeting was always and intended to and historically been for financial issues, to clean up issues dealing with our budget, the prior year, and cleaning up the current fiscal year. So as much as I support this, I think it's a great thing to do. Certainly will help the town. I'm going to vote not to. Essentially, I'm voting to defer this, and I will be voting equivalently on other bylaw changes to defer them till the spring annual town meeting.
Yes.
Then I move to approve Article 9, and the reason I do is there are so many changes we have to make to our bylaws, so many amendments.
Was it second?
Oh, I'm
She's
sorry.
making the motion.
She made a motion.
I'll second for
Okay,
discussion.
now we're in
Okay.
discussion.
And so many
I second
amendments and corrections that need to be made to the bylaws that we have not addressed for years and years and years. There's a backlog of things we need to fix. And if we put it all in the Springtown meeting, it will be a 3-day extravaganza like Amherst has. And so I think we have to start just plowing through these things. So I support the bylaw change.
Paul?
I have 2 points. Mark, you're right in a way, but it also was, there was only just to clean up the financials. It really wasn't supposed to, and we got way beyond that as well. The question I have is, last year we went through a dog hearing, and I know this is probably coming on because of that, I'm assuming, right? So do these penalties, and I know when Attorney Martell was here, that we had some limitations as what we could fine someone for like that. But then we had the case that was before us was so blatantly, I'm not going to do it type of thing. Does it, upping it from $15 to $30, is that, do we think that's going to take care of that?
The situation we encountered, no.
Yeah.
I don't think there was a sum of money that could take care of that. The reason, the explanation really says it. Our animal control officer was here and went through the process for the board of what happens when you're supposed to license your dog and you miss the thing, you send a letter, and then it goes. I mean, a lot of administrative rigmarole for $15, and this should be even 30 is still a light fee, but it at least makes the payback a little better to make it worth our while for the work that we have to do, and we have to do it. And can I, to Mark's point, I'm still relatively new to town meeting form of government, but I guess I thought the practice in town had been for specifically things like smaller bylaw changes were usually deferred to fall town meeting because of the budget was really the main item at the annual town meeting. And I guess I'd ask, I think this, my conversations with town council and finance director that have been that way. So I'm surprised to hear that that's the case.
Okay.
I just want, also, just to let people know, we're not raising the dog license fee. This is the penalty.
The penalty's correct.
Right, I
For
think
late
that's
payment.
important so people don't,
For late payment.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because a lot of dog lovers out there, and we don't want that
And
anymore.
internally, we're improving our tracking of it.
Right.
And I think through the improvement of the tracking, we discovered how much time we spend on this. And it really just, is it going to make a big impact on the budget? No, but it's the principle of the thing, I think, on this one. Would you agree? Yeah.
Any other comments? Okay, my comment is, first of all, thank you to the group that spent the time doing this. There's a lot of work put into this. I think there was a town manager, our city, or our town attorney, the planning board. I think you had several meetings and punched out about 3 or 4 of these issues.
I don't think this one is in that grouping.
Okay.
But
But still, there's been a pretty heavy-duty effort.
On this one, we had the town clerk and the police department, town council, finance. I mean, we did internally. This was a bigger one, but the ones that we're going to be coming to were a more
Right.
collaborative effort.
And while I may agree with Mark too on the springtime and all that, I think we punch this stuff through whenever we can get it through, because these are needed changes, or well thought out changes. And I can't imagine much engagement, but yet when you get to Springtown meeting, you can't tell what engages people, and we could be bogged down significantly with something that really has little merit.
Or after the budget get passed, 2/3 of the meeting leaves, and
Right. So, I'm going to support the things, but I do understand, Mark, your point. I agree with your point. I guess in a pure world, that would be best, but we're not dealing in a pure world. We're trying to play catch-up now. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? You want to read one, Mr. Gold?
Sure. The Article 10 asks to see if the town will vote to amend Section 6-311 of licensing solicitors and canvassers of the general bylaws. And without reading this whole thing, it has changes that address the comments made during the Attorney General's review of a similar bylaw made in another community. So it really is, to paraphrase what we heard earlier tonight, cleaning up the language to make this more specific. And in fact, the specific change is, it says, for the purposes of this subsection, the term "in clear language" shall mean words spoken in language spoken by the occupant, which are reasonably expected to be understood to a person of ordinary intelligence. And that's how people should explain who they are and what they're doing.
Take a motion.
I move to accept Article 10.
Second. Second.
Alex did.
Okay. Discussion?
Yeah, I could, Richard, for the
Sure.
same reason. Again, it's a bylaw change. My comment this time is that we're not required. We don't have the same burden of bylaws for communicating the town warrant in our special town meeting as we do in our annual town meeting. The warrant for a special town meeting does not get distributed to every home. It does not have to be. It will not be. It doesn't go in the reminder or whatever it is. The timing is different, and so I think the communication is less. I think it shows by the turnout of the town meeting. Mr. Foster, I think your comments to the last article were exactly what my point was. Gee, if these appeared in the annual town meeting, we'd tend to get bogged down because people would talk about them. That's the point. They're bylaw changes. People ought to be around to talk about them. We shouldn't be shuffling them through in a town meeting where we expect 55 people to show up, where our quorum is 50 or 76 people where quorum is 60 because it's not well communicated. Again, I absolutely support this bylaw change. I think it's a great thing to do. I'm going to vote against it because I think it should go before the entire town and let them know what's going on, and at least be communicated to them. Because very frankly, most people in town will never even know this bylaw changed because this won't appear in their home as part of the warrant.
Don't ever let it be said I don't change my mind, because I forgot the fact that the warrant is not distributed townwide. That was an omission on my part, and that's a very valuable part that you brought up. I appreciate you correcting me. And Paul had a comment.
Yeah. To Attorney Martell, it says for commercial purposes in here. Do we have to allow people to come door to door to houses in Long Meadow?
Yeah, the reason that for commercial purposes was prohibited is you can prohibit commercial purposes. You can restrict commercial purposes, but you can't non-commercial purposes. There's a Supreme Court case on that. And the Attorney General, actually the town of Ludlow was the town I'm talking about here that I also represent, and they tracked Long Meadow's soliciting and canvassing bylaws, and then when it went to the Attorney General, these changes were suggested. So by adding the phrase for commercial purposes, that makes the bylaw applicable to commercial purposes but not non-commercial purposes. The second change is just to make it more obvious as to what clear language means when you disclose the nature and purpose of the business that's carrying on the activity. And then the third point was because it shouldn't be open-ended when someone applies for registration to conduct the soliciting or canvassing. There should be a deadline for the police chief to act, so this person will know whether or not they have their registration has been acted on, so it just doesn't sit there. Those are three three changes.
But my question is, do we have to allow commercial purposes?
You
Meaning,
don't. Oh, yeah, well, can you,
can we say we don't allow anybody to go door to door for commercial purposes?
yeah, I think you could.
So the non-commercial, as a politician.
That's the free speech part
That's the
of it.
political part.
Yeah.
So obviously, Attorney General who's elected is never going to say you can't go door to door, because I might be coming to your town, folks. And but we could restrict if we actually decided and said we don't allow commercial door to door in Long Meadow.
I think you could do that. I mean, this is kind of coming at me, but I think that's
No,
the
no,
whole
yeah,
idea.
I'm
That's
just
the whole
asking.
idea of why we put in for commercial
Okay.
purposes.
Because quite frankly, I mean, I have an issue when you're sitting in your backyard and someone comes up and is trying to sell you Encyclopedia Britannica, hardcover edition. And
Where are you dating yourself?
no, it happened fairly recently, so or whatever they were selling. I just think that I think it's more of a nuisance, and door to door is not done. I know maybe 40, 50 years ago you had the Fuller Brush guys and all that other fun stuff doing that, but Mark, you, as Rich said, when you said you jarred it with me as well, that these are specifically annual town meeting issues, and I agree with you. I really like to see the board discuss whether we actually want to allow commercial solicitation in town. Because even though people put up no soliciting signs on their door, that doesn't prevent someone from knocking. And I think, and quite frankly, in the day and age of security and home invasions and all that other fun stuff, I think I'd rather see it not allowed than amending it to. Because I don't know if people follow that when someone goes in and signs up for it and they fill out the proper document. I don't know if anybody's actually following through with it to see if they're on the streets they're supposed to be on and so forth. So I would like to have this deferred to the annual town meeting and actually have the board look and get legal opinion as to whether or not we actually can restrict it to zero commercial solicitation.
Remember, this is just canvassing. This isn't soliciting. And the bylaw defines canvassing as person-to-person distribution of literature, periodicals, seeking to enlist membership, seeking to present organizational information. That's canvassing, and that is what can be done for commercial purposes. The soliciting, there is no restriction that it only be for commercial purposes. I mean, certainly there are policy issues here that you may want to pull back and take a look at.
Go ahead.
Just very quickly, I think the point is well taken about the warrant. I think some of these bylaws that are being proposed are to cover either deficiencies or possible liability exposures to the town. And I think it's incumbent upon me, anyway, to put them forward as soon as possible and as soon as a scheduled legislative meeting is available, simply because the town is exposed. If the board wants to make the policy decision to hold off until the annual meeting, that's fine, but I just want to be mindful that if an issue comes up that didn't get addressed in between the time, that's the risk you run.
Any other discussion? And the motion was for approval on this?
Place it on the warrant.
To place it on the warrant? I think I have the same opposition that you brought, and it's not against the fine work that you guys did, Stephen, that's far be it. I just think it's likely fair if the distribution does go out in warrant to every citizen. And it's a small point that I hang my hat on, but it's a point that I think is valid.
Richard, could I try to respond to your
Sure.
concern? To me, and I acknowledge the force of Mark's arguments, this seems, I mean, I looked it up. I mean, this is such a minor thing, and by adding the phrase commercial purposes and cleaning it up a little bit, I think it goes in the direction that you're talking about. Maybe not as far as you want to go, Paul, but so I don't have any heartburn over it. I can't imagine anybody's ever going to look at this very closely. So I would propose we move forward on it.
Okay. Any more comments?
Yeah, I support it because these cleanups, I think, are really important in some of the minor bylaw changes. Nowadays, people don't read the warrant that goes into their packet. I think we could also put press releases out. We could put it on the website. I believe the town manager has gone on and actually done a YouTube explaining what's on the warrant. I think there's other ways that we can communicate to people before and after the meeting. And when you talk about the number of people that attend each of the town meeting and the spring meeting, we're not talking about a huge percentage difference in the population. So it might sound theoretically important for it to go into everyone's box, but I think practically we need to keep moving on these things, or else it's going to take us 10 years to really make the bylaw changes that we all feel that are essential. So I support this article.
People that watch that would very well.
Some rather good compelling arguments, all of which are true. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Stephen, did you say that you were following up with press releases on this stuff?
It was one of the things we have done in the past is and we did one time where I just presented it and it was awful and 3 people watched, but we did do an interactive Our Town with Arlene Miller on the warrant. We can certainly do the same thing. I mean, issuing a press release on something like this is I think, you reserve the press releases for the big things. I look at this as really kind of a minor cleanup. There is some exposure on here when it's people coming to your door for the purposes you're saying. I mean, I think the way I look at this now is if you do this now, you're not letting the great be the enemy of the good, and you move in your direction without having to overdo it. And sometimes minor issues take as much time as big issues, and if you can be efficient with it, you can, like I said, not let the great be the enemy of the good, and I think that applies to all of these. I mean, all of these bylaws, and there are dozens of them that we spent time looking at. Right. And we thought, what's kind of the most pressing in the areas of kind of rental property, which is kind of a hot issue now. Like I said, it never even occurred to me that the special town meeting was not an appropriate place for this, because quite frankly, looking back at previous town meetings when I research what we've done in the past, it seems like this is exactly when this stuff gets done here. So honestly, it's really, I don't think there's anything on here that town hall's going to burn down if we don't do it. So if the will of the board is to keep them off, that's fine.
Rich, can I try to offer a happy medium? Is that I think once this is finalized, whether it's November 3rd or November 4th, when we sign off on it, perhaps at that point we can use the Blackboard Connect and alert the residents that the warrant is published and where they can find it. And that way, we know it went to every household, although not in paper form.
Right.
We alerted them, and 5,000. And actually, that's probably better than sending it in the reminder where people aren't looking for it.
I think that's a good alternative. I appreciate you offering that, Paul. Now that I've been pulled in half and glued back together. Okay, are we ready to vote?
Yep.
All in favor? All opposed? And we will follow through, I guess, Stephen, like Paul said, once it's approved, we'll consider a Blackboard Connect or a press release that just tells people these are going to be on the warrant. And they don't have to hold the details, you just say
Go to the website for information on town meeting warrant.
Yeah, since we don't send the warrant out to every household in the
we can refer everybody to it and let them know that for paper copies are available by request or something like that, or at town hall.
Great. Thank you for that suggestion.
So Article 11 will go on the warrant.
That was 10 we just talked about.
That was 10. We just went through.
10.
I move to place Article 11 on the town warrant as it's presented.
Okay, and second?
Second.
And for the education of people at home, this is to see if the town will vote to amend Article 5, Chapter 800, demolition delay of structures of historic and architectural significance in the following respects, and there's a lot of stipulations put down that'll be added to the blue bylaw. There's quite a bit of information contained. Do we have any discussion on this item? Marie?
I want to thank the extra work that you put into it. I really appreciate it, because I know we tried this in the spring and there were some errors and it was conflicting, and you sat down and pulled through. So, Ms. Hoff, thank you very much.
I think anybody that takes the time to sit down and try to review bylaws should be taken out to dinner, because it's an arduous...
Richard.
Thanks, Richard.
Set it in height.
It's an arduous task that needs to be done, and we never get to it, and we finally get into it, and it's really great to see that stuff take place. So we knew it was important. Any other discussion? I got Paul's credit card. Okay. Take a vote. All in favor? All opposed? Okay. Article 12. Okay, Mr. Martell, this is the one on the zoning,
Yes.
and
Can we just explain to the folks at home, Article 12 is...
Sure you can.
I'm going to, the Article 12 says to see if the town will vote to change the zoning district in which land described in this article is located from residential A district to the business district. The property that's described then in a fairly lengthy paragraph is the property that falls on, I believe it's Dwight Road, or William Street, between the Long Meadow Shops and the First Church. There's a property, a section of property in that is now zoned Residence A District that has been requested by a petitioner through the Planning Commission to redistrict from Residential A to Business District. Is that a fair summary of what this is?
fair summary.
Planning Board will be having a public hearing on this matter on October 29th.
October 29th.
What time?
7 p.m. in this room.
7 p.m. in room A15 of the Long Meadow High School.
Which is the room we're in
Which
right
is
now.
televised.
Which will be televised.
And it will be televised. Okay, did we have a motion?
I move to accept Article
Article 12?
12.
Okay, and we have a second?
I'll second for discussion.
Second for discussion, we're in
Place on the
discussion.
warrant.
Mark's already had it pretty good. No, you just introduced the article, thank you.
Yeah,
And we're in discussion.
So I got the question from the town attorney that we talked about earlier, that this is a planning board is placing this on here, not the select board. Correct? Oh, you don't know,
that-
okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's my understanding. They've asked you to,
Okay, so is this like a CPA article that are you saying
Well-
that this has to be placed on here by the law
well,
of
by,
the process?
the opinion that I hope everybody got, that I sent out yesterday. Well, no, actually, it was to Alex, and I copied
Right,
everybody
you
else.
copied it.
Where I concluded that the procedure that's contemplated by General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 5, that when a landowner chooses to follow that procedure by filing a proposed zoning amendment with the Select Board, who, as Alex indicated, shall forward it to the Planning Board, which you did. The Planning Board has scheduled a hearing, will hold a hearing, and that once the Planning Board holds the hearing and makes its recommendation, that means that it shall go on the warrant. Now, Mr. Grant, doesn't agree with me, and he can speak for himself, but I sort of see the point that Alex is making, that there are two different phrases in the General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 5. One is fails to vote, contemplates a possibility that the matter doesn't reach town meeting, and there's another phrase, unfavorably acted upon, which triggers a 2-year hiatus before the matter can be voted on again. And in my view, the phrase fails to vote, and that comes up in the situation where the planning board, where the town meeting fails to vote, and that means that the planning board may need to hold another hearing if the matter is to be brought back again for another vote, which is more than 6 months after the planning board hearing and recommendation. So I think that the language fails to, well, do you want to speak and then I'll comment?
Can I just ask a follow-up
Sure.
question? Because if the planning board is going to have a forum, did you guys actually vote to approve this site and design review or whatever you're approving or not approving?
No, what we're doing is having a public hearing, which is required by the Massachusetts General Law statute, on a request to have a zoning change. That's what the public hearing is on. What the planning board will do is have the public hearing, and then deliberate afterwards in a public meeting and vote on whether we recommend to town meeting, that we recommend that the zoning change go forward.
Okay, so
There's no site and design involved at this
Okay,
point.
so this article is by the person seeking the zoning change,
Correct.
not by the planning board, not by the
Yep.
town, right? so
Correct.
all right, so
Correct.
just we're clear. And your opinion is that because of the process, it has to go there.
Yes.
And to my question again is, does it say which town meeting, or is it?
No.
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 Because
I mean, the only thing is that if it, supposing the planning board has its hearing, and it's on the warrant, and for some reason it's tabled, for example. No, there is a failure to vote on it at the meeting, which could be for a bunch of different reasons besides it's not being on the warrant. They, move to table it or whatever. Then if it is brought back at a subsequent town meeting, which is more than 6 months after the planning board hearing, the planning board would have to hold another hearing. They want a fresh hearing, so to speak, with a recommendation on the proposed change
And it would be
at the
6
time
months.
it's voted on.
Okay. So is there the potential then for us to say, actually to Mark's point, because this is not a cleanup article. This is the leash or the penalty for the not renewing your dog license is a cleanup thing, I think, and I'm comfortable with that at this meeting. This is definitely a meeting where you could have 75 people on discussing the zoning fate of the heart of the town. And so is it possible for us to say, this should go before the town, but it should go before the annual town meeting?
No,
It would seem to me that it would be contrary to the timeframes that are set out in the article to have it
Okay,
put
that's what I
over
was-
to
okay.
the annual town.
Right, the state law is pretty clear on these matters, and there's a time frame. Once this process starts, you have time one to bring it forward, like to the planning board. Time two is to have a public hearing. Time three is to bring it to town meeting. Actually, if this had been, if the applicant had really been persistent and the town was all gung-ho about, say, a zoning change, this could have happened in September with a special town meeting. It could happen that fast. So, the state is very protective of these things. They want to make sure that zoning changes really go through in a prescribed time in a prescribed manner, and really we can't interfere with it, whether it's you, the select board, our planning board. It's just a matter of process at the state level.
Thank you.
Yes. So, I think Paul's question sort of illuminates something about the analysis, Dave, because clearly the statute contemplates that more than 6 months could pass, right?
Yes.
I mean, that is explicitly provided for. So the fact that more than 6 months could pass makes it clear that this statute doesn't create the rights of the proposer to a vote in anything. And I think the mechanism that we discussed before is actually kind of critical to the analysis as well, because I think it's clear that we actually have to place items on the warrant. I mean, Section 10 says, under the warrant, under the hands of the selectmen. Now, should we fail to do something that we shall do, that we must do, then we can be sued, right? I mean, we've violated the statute, we can be sued, an injunction could be issued to make us perform our duty, right? Mm-hmm. So, and the fact that that mechanism exists, so for example, if we outright rejected a citizen position that we shall insert, we could be forced to do it by a court telling us to comply with this law. So turning to this, I think a court would be, can you imagine a court putting an injunction against us for having failed to do something that no statute says that we shall do? Which sort of kind of circles back to to the point that I was making, is that it is discretionary on our part Because, I mean, not only could we be sued, I mean, we could be sued for damages. I can't imagine us being held liable for something that no statute tells us that we must do. So I think what that all adds up to, and I thank you for pointing out the difference, the Section 5 contemplates that a city council or a town meeting could fail to vote to adopt, in which case one remedy, one consequence follows. And then it also contemplates unfavorably acted upon, i.e. a rejection, in which case you can't even consider it anymore. To me, this statute is all about putting the brakes on the zoning process, creating rights on the part of the public to participate. There's absolutely nothing in here that creates a right of the proposer to have something voted on. So I think it's a discussion for this board of whether we want to put it on the warrant article. And I think we'd be hard pressed to have anybody say that we're statutorily obligated to put it on the warrant article.
Dave. Number one, Mr. Grant, are you opposed to then a public forum then at town meeting that the public shouldn't debate on this? This has to pass, first of all, by a 2/3 vote. Why would you be so concerned that you want to stop this process at this point at tonight's meeting? Number one. Number two, I'll now get into the law. What will happen is tonight you guys will vote and pull this off the warrant. You will get, the petitioner will call the Attorney General, and I will guarantee you will get a letter telling you to put it into a special town meeting, which will be in December, and it will cost the town $10,000 to run a special town meeting. Zoning bylaws are mandatory. They have to go forward to the public. What you're talking about, the remedies are the fact the planning board does not act on this. We have to have a public hearing. The public hearing happens in a specific period of time. It is now posted. After the public hearing, we have to report to the select board within 21 days in writing our recommendations of whether we're for this, or as Dave said, maybe perhaps we abstain and don't even move on it. At that point, that's when the law says that an executive board or a city council can then act on and remove this item from the law. I think you're missing a key connection point here.
Which language are you talking about?
I don't have it in front of me. I just done enough of this to know that it really is nothing you can stop at this point. It just is a moving forward process. If the planning board doesn't act on this, it will then come back to your board. But I think within 21 days, I believe we will be at town meeting anyway.
I mean, could I hand you this so you could show us the language?
I guess while he looks at that, I mean, to the extent that fails to vote is the crucial language, I mean, it could fail to vote for any number of reasons.
Right.
Not necessarily because it wasn't on the warrant.
Right, I agree.
I think fails to vote is consistent with the view that it was on the warrant, but there was no vote.
Okay, maybe, but the question is, what is it that compels us?
I mean, maybe an element of policy crept into my opinion, but it seems to me that if a petitioner chooses to follow the statutorily designed process for a zoning amendment, and has it brought before the planning board for a hearing, the planning board hears on it, that person is entitled to have it heard at a town meeting. And I'm not saying that it's so clear that you're looking at an injunction if you don't do it, but to me, it's part of the process, and once it's put in motion, the natural conclusion is a vote at a town meeting.
Right, but the Massachusetts legislature knows, as the courts often say, how to make it mandatory. So they say, in certain cases, that we shall insert in the warrant.
There's no shall. I'm not.
Right. And so given that it knows how to make it mandatory, it seems unlikely they would make it mandatory by inference. Go ahead. Do
I'm
you have
sorry,
some
Alex, let's
language?
back to day one. I don't know when, I forget when the Lomino Shops came before this board, and you folks moved it forward to the planning board. That was your opportunity.
But that's
It
a
says-
shall right there.
That's right there. The Board of Selectmen shall, within 14 days of receipt, submit to the planning board for review.
So
And
we
did you
it
not do
because
that?
we-
Did not
right,
the select
because
board do that?
we had to do it because it said shall.
You didn't have to. You could have, at that point, you could have refused it. That was your right.
told that, but that's okay.
It's a possibility. Now, moving forward to his next point, he's put may in a section here. It's surrounded in red ink. It says that, but it may adopt or reject. This is a city council may
Or town
adopt or
meeting.
reject. But this is after it says that the planning board has had its hearing and its review, and the 21 days have expired. You see, it's all timing, Alex. It's.
No, I understand, but it's permissive, not mandatory.
You can get in there.
I think it is.
Jump that in the table?
Well, it's not, nothing is mandatory.
We're gonna let Marie talk for a minute.
We just talked about having shall on the CPC, and we found, Alex, you found a way to go around shall on how that wouldn't work there. The question is why? Why are we trying to do this? Why are we trying to stop CPC projects from going to the town warrant? Why are we trying to stop zoning things to go from the town warrant? When there's not only the intent of the law is that the legislative branch of our government makes these decisions, public has the right. We're not the tyranny of the few making the decision. There's been a tradition in this town, and tradition can be called case law in what's been going on in the town, and that is zoning, and that's true across the Commonwealth. And the CPC projects, they go forward. Now you're saying, well, they can sue us. Well, why are we doing this? Why are we going to these extra steps? If we have an argument we want to make against the zoning changes, you make it in front of the public. You are very eloquent. Make it to the public and say, this is not best for this town. The same thing with the CPC. Make the argument. Mark is ready to make those arguments. But why we are struggling so hard to twist the law, to find an analysis that makes it for two or three of us to make a decision what our townspeople are allowed to hear. Let them have it and let them make the decision. And for us to go that, I'm saying why? What is the purpose? What is the goal here in order to stop this? I don't understand.
You know, I just want to make one broad comment about Massachusetts as a unique state, Commonwealth in the United States, and that is zoning is specifically local. Everybody says Massachusetts, the state house, the legislature is big brother. The one thing about Massachusetts is, which drives us, and I'm on the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, we're a regional planning authority, we like to see things regional. Our hands are tied because zoning is local. And why they want zoning to be local? Because they want town meeting, city councils to make the decisions for their residents. The residents vote and speak and make these decisions on a local level. Tonight, I see this select board is trying to usurp something that the state, that the voters, obviously the legislature has determined that should be voted on at town meeting, and with a big penalty, 2/3 vote. I mean, there's no probability. It only takes two people to speak against something like this matter and reason, and it will be, voted down. So I don't see the issues here. It's the way it is. It's really local. It's for town meeting to decide. It's a democratic process.
How about we take one more comment from Paul and we'll pull a vote?
Walter, I don't think you've heard that the board say not to put this. I said I would like to see this at an annual town meeting.
Right.
Okay, we haven't voted that way. I don't think you've heard the discussion that way. Actually, why it really matters, Marie, because we just heard tonight that we did not have to pass it on. And we were told we absolutely had to pass it on. We were told we had no choice but to pass it on under the statutes of the law. So that's why it's important to
debatable.
have.
That's true, Paul, and that could be
Oh, no.
right. You're right, and that's a murky.
So that's why it's important to ask the questions
Right.
and find out.
Well, he would have come to the planning board, and next we would have accepted it.
I've been
see?
to enough of your meetings to know that you have to follow the law.
Right.
I know that,
I know.
and I know your hands are tied, even on issues you might not agree with, because
Exactly.
the builder
Exactly.
follows the law. I respect
Exactly.
that, I really do. You
Okay.
guys are fighting with one hand tied behind your back, if not two. So
Okay.
I just asked the
know.
question of whether it could be deferred, because I think the annual town meeting is where you get the people out, but if it can't, it can't.
Okay, I'd like to call a vote on this then.
I was,
You have one more
I just
comment?
have it's a general question, and
Okay.
I guess it's to Walter and to Attorney Martell. And that is, my question is a general one to Walter and Attorney Martell, and to, I guess it's about zoning changes. You know, if I decided that I wanted to change my backyard to agriculture and become a farm, okay, Walter, your comments are kind of thing, if I petition the planning commission or planning board, it's got to come before town meeting? Is that what you're?
No, I think either.
Does the petitioner have a right to
No.
set the agenda?
No, they don't. Either boards have the right to refuse, I think, a petition. And their last remedy is to go out and get signatures, and then they can really deliver to you. I forget the amount of signatures required.
Special town meeting.
200. Then they can come. Then now you have a problem. Then you have to then say
Right.
they have 200 signatures.
Because that's
Hand
what
it
the statute says.
And right. In this case, though,
But there's no, Attorney Martell, I mean, is there any obligation by us as a select board or the planning commission, as a planning commission, to bring us a private organization, group, individuals, landowners, request to have a zoning bylaw, or having zoning change or zoning classification change to a town meeting vote?
Well, I mean, I think if they follow the process, to be consistent with my opinion, it's entitled, the petitioner is entitled to have it heard at a town meeting. However, that doesn't mean that it would be upheld by the Attorney General. You have concerns, the example used for spot zoning, it might not be, that farm example might not be allowed for those reasons, because the Attorney General does pass on all zoning bylaw amendments, and there are limits as to what can be done to be consistent with the zoning bylaw.
But in terms of being heard at a time, because, I've always said that, at the right town meeting, especially a special fall town meeting, I can probably get past that every house in town has to be pink with purple polka dots, because sometimes we have so few people there, and if we do it right, and I'd hate to see this be passed at a special town meeting where there's, limited participation by our residents, and again, I think it's a major change. It's in the center of town.
He just said it's by the timelines.
yeah.
By the time.
The process has begun.
You guys pulled the trigger. It's done in this case. But I think in the future, I can't speak. I think town council will be more specific to this. But I believe
Said we had to pass it along.
On that.
Yes.
Well, then he did. Then that's the opinion you have to go by.
Okay, I'd like to call a vote on the issue. All in favor? All opposed?
I'm going to actually vote in favor, but I'm sorry, it was a little delayed on that. I mean, I would vote against it, but I've been to enough planning board meetings to understand the process. I don't like the fact that it's at a special.
I don't want to add one last comment. I mean, we have a process. We're going to televise this thing as a public hearing, and people
in
can
fact,
really
this can go
exercise
to
on
a
this.
special town meeting. They can turn right around and do a petition.
Is on the warrant then?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's, okay. What number is it, 13?
13.
To see if the town will vote to add the following provisions to Article 4, Section B, use in residential zones of the zoning bylaws of the town, or take any action relative thereto. Accessory use shall include the parking of any vehicle during the period of 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. other than on a paved area, and such paved area shall not exceed 20% of the area bounded by the sidelines of the lot, the front of the residential structure, and the street line.
Richard, can I give a brief introduction on this?
As soon as I get a second.
Oh, do we have a
You
motion?
didn't get it first.
Oh, no, I mean, as soon as I get the motion to,
I move to place Article 13
okay.
on the warrant.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Stephen?
Articles 13, 14, 15, and 16 are zoning, and I don't know if some of them are general, but they're bylaw revisions that are a result of the bylaw review that I've reported on in previous meetings being conducted by representatives of the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Planning Board, Town Council, the Building Commissioner, and myself. And we've talked a little bit, comments are made about bylaw revisions and how they're important and what a tough job it is. And we started peeling the onion on a whole bunch of different subjects and started going back and forth on the pros and cons of different changes. And it became clear very quickly how really huge, how monolithic this task really is. And we decided to, using your expression, Mark, eat the elephant one bite at a time. One of the issues that has come up recently, mostly through the discussion about group homes and also the discussion of the casinos, were issues related to rental housing and multiple people who are unrelated living in the same home. And even though those issues, especially in the case of the group homes, I don't want to go back, retread that ground because these bylaws wouldn't necessarily apply, as we've discovered. But it did highlight areas that our bylaws were not, didn't fully protect the town's interests, we believed. So we went through these, we did some research on other towns' best practices, and highlighted 4 areas of the bylaw that we called, for lack of a better term, kind of the rental property package. They are the parking that we're dealing with now, and then the other ones we can talk about as we get into them. But these really were intended to be a package to address issues that we frequently hear about related to the use to rental properties in town. Article 13 is as straightforward as it gets. People parking on their lawns, and if they're not on the tree belt and in fact on their own property, there really is no enforcement mechanism to prevent that. We get a lot of complaints about it. I know when I lived in Arlington, Virginia, you couldn't park on your lawn. So this is, I think, this is a precedented bylaw, and it's something that if we talk about the visual, the aesthetic value of the town and what that does for property values, this is one that would fit into that category.
Okay, we had it seconded, and we have any discussion by board? Seeing no discussion, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of Article 13? All opposed? Okay. Your opposition was stated before?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And we will follow through fast. Article 14, to see if the town will vote to add the following definition to Article 2, definitions of the zoning bylaw of the town, or take any action relative thereto. It says family. Any member of the individual related by blood, marriage, adoption, living and cooking together in a single house unit, provided that the group of not more than 4 persons living, cooking together, but not necessarily related by blood group or marriage, either two or the other, may be considered a family. The section, however, does not apply to non-related disabled persons as defined by the applicable federal and state law/regulations. There were some planning board comments on this. They unanimously did not like the language as presented here. For example, family circumstances such as foster children and or grandparentship not addressed. Oh, excuse me, guardianship. I'm a grandparent. I used to do that in there. Not sure what Ludlow intended by this bylaw. So apparently the planning board did not embrace
you
this.
haven't had your hearing.
No, we didn't have a hearing. We did a preliminary review, because remember, these things were just thrown at us at the last minute. We had a planning board meeting on October 1, and we quickly reviewed these 3 items, the ones you just approved, and then the ones after that, family and then Article 14. We just had comments off the cuff that people were, members of the board were concerned about the definition of family. I mean, it's just sort of, heavy, important, and what could be enforceable? Could you have, as we mentioned, guardianships, foster children? Are those issues where perhaps, neighbors complain and somebody enforces and throws people out because it's not specifically in the definition of family? I don't know what your board thinks, and back to Dave, I mean, this is, I believe, came from a Ludlow bylaw, so we're just throwing it out. We have not had an official discussion on this. We will, again, this is something, if it does go forward tonight, will be on October 29th, and public hearing and with comments. So it's a matter of discussion, I think.
Is there a motion to put it on the warrant to continue discussion?
I thought we had a motion and a second on this.
No.
No? Okay. You have a motion?
I moved to
A
put
second?
Article 14 on the,
Second.
Second? Okay. I'm sorry. We granted.
Yeah,
No,
just-
we did have a motion. Oh, no, that was, excuse me, that was,
So briefly, and I
13.
appreciate Walter's comments. I mean, we did discuss it in our offline meetings, but and I don't know even if another member of the planning board was looking into this. Like I said, Richard, you and I were on a conference call with town council and town land use council. We were researching the group home things. Like, I want to be clear, that does not apply. This issue does not apply to group homes,
does
just to
not
make
apply to
absolutely
group
clear. But it was pointed out to us that, oh, by the way, you don't have a definition of family, so if someone wanted to rent their house to 10 total strangers, like 10 college students or something like that, there could be a problem with our bylaws having an enforceable mechanism. Most towns do have a definition like this. The cloth that these are cut from is not all that big. There are some, Attorney Martell did a bunch of research on best practices. We kind of looked at a few different versions, and the one that had been developed by him for Ludlow seemed to be, and I don't want to use the word generic, but kind of like that, where it sort of seemed to catch the basics that we wanted to achieve and was tested, I believe, court tested.
Well, it wasn't court
Well,
tested.
it hasn't been court tested, that's the issue.
Attorney General approved it.
Right, I meant to say Attorney General approved, because really the definition of family has not been court tested. I think that's one of the issues. So again, this is one where we haven't had a definition of family, but we do believe that there is some risk of some exposure in our bylaws to not have one, and that was recommended by both town council and town land use council, and that's why it's in here.
go ahead,
I
Mark.
mean, it comes up in the context of what is a permitted use in the residence zone, and one of those uses is a detached, permanent, single-family dwelling, which is, the corner, that's the foundation of Long Meadow, are single-family homes, and what is a family, and that's why it's important.
I would just like to ask Attorney Martell a question based on, the way I read this is if a home was occupied by a husband and wife, or maybe a single parent, and 6 natural children, and 3 foster children, or 2 foster children in a guardianship or something like that, that would be acceptable within this definition, since the numbers of quote-unquote unrelated people are less than 4. Is that a fair statement? Because
So it's I don't know, frankly, as a matter of law, whether a foster child,
but this says
it'd have to be by blood, marriage, or adoption, so I guess that would rule out the foster child. So their natural family.
But if there were only 3 foster children, that's less than 4, right? And so the intent is that you can't have a house with 4 or 5 or 4, more than 4. Is that how it might be read?
I mean, I think that the group of not more than 4 living together, but not necessarily related by blood or marriage, wouldn't come up in the context of an adjunct to a so-called conventional family. I think what that is there for is so that if there's a house that can't be occupied by more than 4 people who aren't related to each other, so you couldn't have 8, college students living together in a house as a single-family use.
Right, I'm just trying to.
The foster child thing.
I'm just trying to understand
There
that.
may be some limitation in the foster child statute that says you can't use a zoning bylaw to limit the number of foster children. I just don't know.
Right, but I'm just trying to, because Mr. Gunn's comments are very powerful.
Yeah, we're just being the devil's advocate here. That's what we want to make sure.
But on the other hand, if the number 4 says that 3 foster children is acceptable, and 4 foster children, but a 5th may not be, that's very different than none are.
I mean, I think the planning board should sort of feel challenged. Well, they should, first of all, it should be easy for the planning board to come up to agree with the importance of having a definition of family.
Yes.
If it's not this one, I strongly urge you to come up with another one. That's all.
Like I said, I think the simplicity of this is Attorney General's already signed off on it, and I'm guessing the Attorney General did that review, Mark, and looked at the different scenarios. And the big thing is the Attorney General has to sign off on whatever we do here, and if we already know this language is approved, it does protect the town, it will pass muster to the Attorney General's office, and it may not be perfection, but it certainly gets the job done.
And that you guys are still going to be meeting and reviewing this anyway, aren't
We
you?
might not recommend this as it's written, but,
Right.
I mean,
Well, you
I'm
can
speaking
do
for
anything
myself,
you
I
want
worked with, right,
There's
of
no
course.
magic to this if you have something else.
Yeah.
But it's
I
important.
mean, to come up with new language and have an amendment on the floor. and-
Well, it wouldn't even be an amendment on the floor.
It would be just a new language, a whole new.
Do your own.
Okay.
Well, there's an urgency to this then, so the town feels that a definition of family should go forward and should be at this special town meeting. Because again, Mark, this is back to your point about what do you have at a special town meeting, what do you have at an annual town meeting? So,
Yeah.
Alex?
all right.
I was just going to say, you could always just put behind, next to adoption parentheses, including foster and guardianships.
If you did that, I think it'll probably, I think, go forward. I don't know.
You want to
That was
amend
it.
the language?
I mean,
Well, but, I mean, maybe Alex has other ideas on changes for it, but I just thought it might not be that clean, but it
Well, here-
simplifies if it was
It makes it
already
easy
accepted
for
by the
you.
Attorney
If you
General.
really want this to go forward, I guess your board has to decide whether this is something for, again, fall town meeting or annual town meeting. But if you want to vote on it tonight, I know we will absolutely invite members of the select board to come to the public hearing on the 29th, and now I make these meetings, I'm not the chair anymore, Bruce Colton is, but we generally like to roll up our sleeves and things like this. If it's an urgency and we want to have it go forward, your input would be valuable. But I think you understand that we're not happy with the language. It's a little too defined here. It doesn't address a lot of specific situations. And if we could, maybe massage this and get it better, bring it forward to town meeting. If not, if nobody can agree on it, we'll just not recommend it, and, it'll be a strong, recommendation not to vote for it at town meeting. So it's your call to go forward with it tonight, but I think, like Dave said, if he's charging the planning board to work it out and fine tune it, and then we can come up with new language, put it on the floor at town meeting,
Okay.
and go forward.
So we'll leave it. Alex, do you have something?
I just had a question. I guess this is two sentences, so I'm referring to the second sentence where it talks about not applying to non-related disabled persons. Dave, I assume you're the person to ask. Did we put that in there because we believe that's necessary? I mean, that there's some law out there that requires that, or and if it's not required, sort of what's the
Quite honestly, I didn't think it through. I mean, it's in the Ludlow bylaw. We picked up the Ludlow bylaw. I think that whether it's in there or not, we've been through the disability law enough to know that there are limitations on what you can do.
Well, and see, I guess that's what I was kind of wondering about. Having sort of had that debate, I didn't see any state or federal law that required sort of exempting disabled people. I mean, clearly you can't treat disabled people worse,
Right.
but this sort of elevates disabled people over everybody else. I never saw anything that required that, but
You could probably strike that. I mean, it's a known no-no, not to.
right. You can't discriminate against. Right. Yeah.
I mean, I sort of think it's good for people who are looking at the definition just to sort of have it in their face that there are some overriding concerns.
as they deal
You know,
with disabled people.
I think my recommendation would be to the board that, yes, Steve and our little subcommittee worked on these issues, and family was an important issue here to get a definition in our zoning bylaws. So I think my recommendation would be you should vote for it, move forward, and then I think we're going to have to come up with new language for town meeting on this basis, but maybe massage it and correct it. And I really welcome anybody here or the public that's watching this tonight to please, contribute to this, because this is an important definition, and we know what our intention is. We just want to make sure we get it right.
Any other comments? All in favor of placing on the warrant? All opposed? Okay. And you will follow through with the modifications?
At our
Possibly
public
come to the
hearing,
floor?
yes. Right,
Yeah.
and we'll come up with language
Okay.
for the floor.
Okay.
Mr. Grant and Mr. Gold opposed.
Yes.
Which we, Article 15, to see if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaw of the town by striking subsection 1 and 2 of Article 4, Section E, nonconforming building and use, subsection 1A that now reads, a pre-existing nonconforming use of a structure may not be extended, altered, or changed except by special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals, the ZBA. The proposed extension, alteration, or change of a nonconforming use structure must meet the following criteria. And it goes on for several more sentences. I guess this, have we read enough?
Okay, I move to place Article 15 on the warrant.
Is there a second?
I'll second for discussion.
Second on discussion. We're open for discussion.
Could I ask?
Yeah, it's open.
I guess my question is, sort of what is the evil that we're trying to rectify?
It's more when you have neighborhoods get built out and then the zoning changes and then the things are what are called pre-existing non-conforming. And if you have a non-conforming neighborhood, and there are a bunch of different examples you could use, but say you have 5 houses in a street and they're all non-conforming because zoning has changed, and 3 of them have farmers' porches that extend into the front yard setbacks. If one of the people, wanted to also build a similar farmer's porch that would be in the front yard setback, under our present zoning, it would be considered as continuing the nonconformity, but it would fit right in with the context of the neighborhood. And a lot of planning law is really grounded in how it fits in with its surroundings, for lack of a better term. And so basically it basically says the nonconformity is not going to be detrimental to the appearance of the neighborhood or its surroundings, then it's okay to do it with a special permit from the ZBA. So it's not, even if this is approved, it's not automatic. This is something the ZBA felt, and they're not here, but this is something the ZBA felt pretty strongly about, because it would clear up a lot of the issues that they struggle with. So
Yeah, I mean, to follow up on that, Dave Lavenberg, the chairman of the ZBA, was a member of the sort of zoning bylaw review committee, and he felt strongly about this one because a lot of what the ZBA does is deals with extensions of non-conforming structures, and the approach that they have been following is consistent with the amendment. So he actually was sort of behind it.
yeah, and this is one of those ones where I think state law has changed on it, or something like that.
There's been some case law. that's
Yeah, some
changed.
case
It goes
law
back
about it,
to
right. This is
the intricacies of Chapter 48, Section 6, and non-conforming.
Exactly, and apparently that's what he claims, is that state law has actually marched on beyond what our town-owned bylaws do. And so when they make some of these approvals at their meetings, they're actually using state law in their actual decision and not the town law, because it actually sort of...
Stephen, is this fair to say that this gives our zoning board of appeals greater latitude in allowing nonconformities than they would have under our current zoning bylaws?
I think it's more firmer legal standing to make the decisions.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
I think it does give it
the
your
results
right.
are
Yeah.
more more residents are more likely to be able to do what they want to.
I don't know if that's the result.
Okay, it's not.
No, I mean, the judgment still is that the ZBA still makes a judgment about, about the detriment to the neighborhood. They still make the judgment on that, and their judgment isn't going to change because we passed this. As we said, it's more, there's a little bit of conflict between what state law and case law now says and what our local bylaw says, and they want to clear that up.
We did strike, one of their suggestions, I think we did strike, I forget, was something that gave them a lot more latitude, and I forget what that was. They're actually going to put back in a part of the zoning bylaw, an article that used to give ZBA a lot of discretion on some approvals, and it was actually a citizen petition several years ago at town meeting that struck that from the bylaw. So I guess, and that's
not a part of this.
No, it isn't. So that was the next section after that. But this was more specific to more housekeeping and giving the conformity with the state law.
So maybe I misunderstood what you said, Stephen, because you were talking about other houses. So you're saying, so let's say you've got a non-conforming porch, which is called a farmer's porch, and there's a house on the street that doesn't have that porch. Would it allow that house that doesn't have the porch to have the porch that matches the other non-conforming uses?
No, could I answer for the answer?
Because that's what I thought you said.
Oh, it's no, okay.
Because, there was a section of the bylaw which was stricken by citizen petition a few years ago.
That's what we're talking about.
It's the famous Section I,
Right.
which was called change to give uniformity. And that would allow a person to put a porch on, which was, say, too close to the street line, because the zoning had changed, but there are numerous other houses on the street that have the same porch. That's gone.
Okay, because that's what I thought, because that's why I was tripping over. Because this deals with sort of expanding non-conformity on the same house. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
The same footprint, right?
Any other
Okay,
discussion?
then I misrepresented. I apologize.
Any other discussion? Call for a vote. All in favor? All opposed? Article 16, to see if the town will vote to add the following provisions to Article 5 of the general bylaws of the town or take any action relative thereto. And I'm going to go and just read the conclusion on this, a rather lengthy article. This is generally rental properties that are not owner-operated can be problematic in several ways, including parking issues, property maintenance, and complaints from tenants about landlords. If rental properties are registered, it will help the town departments address these kinds of problems. This bylaw is based on a vacant and foreclosed property registration bylaw that was recently adopted by town meeting.
Okay, I move to place Article 16 on the warrant.
Okay, second? Okay, second. Open for discussion?
Paul?
Briefly, Richard, this is basically the rental property registration that I know has been a hot topic at times at the board level, and as noted in the description, when we did a lot of research on rental registrations. Large cities have them and have a pretty rigorous set of requirements and reporting, and we were able to find, through the work of the building commissioner, a right-sized registration provision for the town. And again, it is based similar in the model we use for the vacant and foreclosed bylaw. And that, as I think I reported last night, we've had some success with in getting a handle on who's responsible for issues and how do we approach them, because a lot of times issues come up and the biggest challenge is finding someone to deal with them. And especially in the case of, for example, an absentee landlord, in the case of a rental property. And that's what this bylaw is intended to rectify, is making sure that when problems come up on a rental property, we know who to contact to address them.
How broad is the definition of maintaining and keeping in good repair? What's defined under that?
State building properties subject to bylaw must be maintained in accordance with state building code, sanitary code, and town bylaws.
Mm-hmm. Which says, maintain and keeping in good repair. Does that mean gutter systems that have to be securely attached to the building, not hanging off? Does that mean it can't have blistering paint?
I would defer to council on the meaning. I mean, I'm assuming it's standard language.
I mean, they would be subject to reasonableness.
Well, yeah.
I'm not sure peeling paint would get you
That
in
certainly is
trouble,
not good repair if the paint's peeling. No, that's the reason I was wondering.
I would defer to the building inspector.
Well, it's not a code enforcement issue, it's an aesthetic issue. Maintaining and keeping in good repair, maintaining is a large word, maintaining.
I do think that under state law, the building commissioner has the discretion on these subjects.
Okay.
I
want just how broad it is, Dave.
I won't even try to fudge it.
Don't even want to go there, huh? Okay. Okay. Well, we throw the words out there and they mean nothing.
Well, not necessarily, depends on how we start using it.
Well, that's true.
It's more than you have now.
Well, we talk about grass mowing. That's the thing that amazes me. We specifically go into grass mowing, but we don't talk about the physical appearance of the structure. And it seems that the physical appearance of the structure is something that's there 24/7, 365. And yet the grass mowing is only current issue for about 4 or 5 months out of the year. That's my point of issue. Yes, Marie?
Well, we could actually later work on a definition section on what that is.
Yeah.
Because so we can really start beefing it up later.
I was kind of hoping we had it now. I thought that was
Does
right.
the foreclosed property bylaw include a definition of maintenance?
I think it probably says the same thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got the trash and debris removal and regular mowing the lawn. Okay, well, I'm not going to belabor it. Just a point. I was wondering if there had been a definition or talk while you guys were meeting. Any other discussion on the article? Let's go for a vote. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, Article 17 is a citizen's petition to see if the town will vote to authorize the purchase of a Quint fire truck and aerial firefighting apparatus with ladder capabilities at a cost of $752,000 or greater or lesser sum using the fire truck funds previously approved by town meeting for the purchase of a fire truck. Pledged donations and certified free cash expected to be $262,000 or a greater or lesser sum, or take any other action relative thereto.
It's a citizen's petition.
Right. That's citizen's
Move
petition.
to Article 18.
Okay, just one.
So that is a shall. So
Yeah, that's a shall. I wanted to read it for the
I
record.
guess I do have a question, though, of why that's placed above a select board article, since our tradition has always been to place citizens petitions at the end.
It could have been the sequence with which was added to the Word document, and we can make that change.
That had already been brought to his attention.
Okay.
Article 18, to see if the town will vote to transfer from available funds in the treasury the sum of $250,000 or greater or lesser sum for the site evaluation, site analysis, programming study, schematic design, and design development of up to 2 sites for a new Department of Public Works complex, or take any action relative thereto.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we place Article 18 on the town warrant for the special town meeting of November 18th.
Second?
Second.
Discussion. We've got an hour and a half. Yes.
It's the first I see of this, and again, if you go back to article number 5, this would now put your free cash below $500,000 level with the amount that was put in.
I was afraid you were going to say that.
Someone said votes have consequences.
Yep, votes have consequences.
Richard?
Yes.
So when I looked at this warrant article, I was a little surprised. I mean, like when I was reading it, I was expecting to see a warrant article like the one we had last year that didn't pass about evaluating the DPW operations. Because I remember when we were having our discussion about goals, the DPW operations question was actually the number 1 goal. And then we had all this vigorous debate, and it all sort of assumed that we would be arguing about it at town meeting. And that, this time, we need to get into that debate. And so that article is not here, but this one is, which just has to do with the with the DPW facility. So I guess, I mean, I don't know, I guess the town manager is the draftsperson. I mean,
No, I was the draftsperson.
you were the draftsperson.
Right.
Okay, so
Right,
could
'cause
I
this
pose the
goes
question to you then?
Yeah, sure. This goes along with our goals and objectives that we outlined. And we're collectively, we said that these were our number 1 and 2 goals. And this falls in line with the decision to not build the complex at its current location. This is actually the next logical step, is to do the site assessments and to start to get some actual figures in front of the board so that they can. There's 2 other steps for this. This will only take you to 30, 35, 40% design, but it'll give you enough that you can wrap your arms around and see what the facility look like. It also would evaluate the sites and give you some actual cost data so that you could move going
Right.
forward. I mean, this wouldn't be hypothetical anymore. This would be real. And it would do an evaluation on the sites. And then the next phase would be to go back to town meeting for the rest of the design money. Let's see, total design on this, we figured it was somewhere around $700,000.
Yeah, on back of the envelope numbers, the tie and bond study called for a 42,000 square foot facility.
Right.
That would be a maximum. Buildings of this description, of this type, are typically $150 a square foot to construct. That puts you about $7 million. 7% for A&E, architectural and engineering. So 7% of $7 million, and this got you a slice of that. So that is how we got to 250. And I think when the board voted to eliminate Pondside Road from consideration as a site, it meant that we have to figure out what the new site is going to be, and it's going to take money. As it stands now, we have a $20,000 to $30,000 estimate to repair the maintenance garage for a collapsing wall, an internal wall, thank God, but a collapsing wall. I suspect we're going to continue to get more bills like this as the existing facility continues to deteriorate, and if the board has this as their number 2 priority, or 1 and 1A, depending. I mean, I guess I look at it as a 1 and 1A. Then these are the next logical steps. This is just basic, basic step 1 and step 1.5 of site selection and then initial design.
Well, and your other thing, too, you've got the programming element in there, which does look at adequate sizing and scope of functions.
Sure.
There's a lot of evaluation of operations that takes place during the programming mode.
So I guess my question wasn't directed at why that's there. I understand why that's there, and I understand why you support it. I mean, I guess the question is why the study of DPW operations isn't there at all.
That is in part of the programming study, where they do the evaluation, because that's how they size the structure when you're looking.
It seems kind of incidental.
I don't understand.
I mean, to me, town meeting said no to that, and so we're going about it a different way. Town meeting has spoken on the issue of the consultant. The issue of the facility needs to be addressed. I guess I didn't. I don't want to speak for Richard because he did want to put this on here, but when I considered it in my own mind, I don't think until we solve problem 1, we can't get to problem 2. I view goal 2, or the site issues, to be something we need to deal with, or a much more unfavorable outcome is going to be forced upon us by virtue of the continued deterioration of the facility.
Yeah, let me take a couple of minutes. I'll just go down some stuff that I had written down. I'll try not to put you to sleep. The existing facility was constructed in 1931, and at that time, the town had a population of approximately 4,500 people. Basically, at that time, for the next 10 years, trolleys would run up and down Longmeadow Street. The town wasn't developed hardly any beyond Laurel. It's very interesting to read the history. They were still putting in sewage lines and water lines to homes that never had them. This town was just starting to bud and develop. The interesting part about it was that the complex that they put in 1931 is essentially identical to what's there now, except we've added some lateral storage areas, the longer bays. But the base structure was what was there in 31. The auto shops and all the shop areas were as designed in 1931. They have never been modified. They've never been increased in size or any substantial changes to the buildings. From when this facility was put in, it was another 25 years until the high school was opened that we just bulldozed and replaced. So that starts to give you a time frame. And it would be nearly 30 more years until our population doubled to that would have been about 9,000 people. In 1931, the town only had 1,294 dwellings, 1,981 registered vehicles, and a population of 4,437 people. We had a meager 23 miles of roadways. Now, they weren't what we have today. They were a combination of Long Meadow Street was asphalt, and there was concrete, and there was some asphalt, but a sizable amount of the roads at that time accepted in the road system were tarred roads. They were actually dirt roads that had tar placed on them. That was a major expenditure that we saw in the reports. They tarred every year. So I mean, we can't even imagine what the town was like at that point. And a major exercise for Public Works at that point, one of the major things was compacting the roads and adding oil to hold down the dust. Our fleet in 1931 was comprised of Model T Ford trucks. And they were replacing one that year with a snow. Yeah, they were replacing one that year with a snowplow for $1,320. To comparison of what we have today would be like comparison an F-150 to a semi-tractor trailer in comparison to the size of vehicles we got today. But yet, and I think everybody is aware, we've been told our present facilities, we can't even get our trucks inside to repair them. So that means in the winter and even during the summer, in any form of weather, if we have to work on one of our trucks, our people are outside laying on the ground trying to fix none of these things. And that's during snowplow operations also. And as I say, our shops are so outdated in size and all. That's what we're forced into. It's not new. The first study was done in 1987. It was a fairly comprehensive study by Reinhardt Engineering, where they went into the subsurface conditions because it was already noted that the complex was falling apart. It was cracking and there was differential shifting taking place. And they did a tremendous amount of core samples, and they revealed that, in fact, looked like it was built on a burn dump. And the soils were not load bearing. They couldn't do anything reasonable at that point to stabilize them. So there was another study, one in 1987. There was a follow-up study in 2008, which was Ty and Bond, which is the one that we've read. And basically, they said the same thing, except they went into a little bit more detail on saying you really need to move the thing out or redevelop. And we already had all the site constraints that we went through. This issue has been before the board for we don't know how many years, but obviously we know it has been kicked. The can has been kicked down the road because it's out of sight, out of mind. If this complex was located on William Street, this would have been replaced 50 to 60 years ago with the pride of every person in this town. There's no doubt about it. It would have been a showcase and it would have been done. But unfortunately, it's down over the hill. And it's out of sight, out of mind. And that's really what happened to it. They've never had the money put into it, and money's always been deferred. We can blame people, this, that, and the other, but I don't think there was ever a shower of money to go down there and rebuild anything, or we'd see a different facility down there. I don't take pride in the fact that DPW doesn't have a Lancer Pride to help them. And we're the Lancer Pride for DPW. And I don't take pride in that, but they do stand alone. And the dedicated men and women are living and working, not living, but working in substandard structures, and yet they provide vital services to our community. So I think it comes to the select board. I understand that we're having problems with the budget. Paul just brought up there's more projects that can go around, but this project has been so terribly postponed and delayed it. I think if we could take just this one constructive step to at least get over the hill and see what it's really going to cost us so we can start to be honest to the people in our town, I think that's what we should be doing. I think that's our responsibility to at least open that next door. And at that, I open the floor. Alex?
So, as you were talking, I was thinking back to our discussion. I mean, it was a rather rigorous discussion. And I remember it was clear that you, me, and Marie all supported the study. Mm-hmm. We had this big discussion. I remember you made the point that you can't evaluate yourself.
Right.
You know, we need to have this. Marie said, you know, this time we're going to fight for it. So, you know, and I think we probably all, and I supported that as well, might have supported for different reasons. But we all supported it. So I'm particularly surprised that this isn't part of the package.
Well, let me ask you a comment there. The operations evaluation and the construction of a new facility are really two completely different pieces of the puzzle. I mean, one goes in and checks and sees, what are you doing today to maintain this, and here's the current standards of how you should maintain it, and here's the accounts you should have. It's really how they operate. It's not where they operate or how
and
big.
that's just my point. And
Right.
see, to me, I think the first thing is, so let's just take a concrete example, outsourcing plowing. We discussed that, right?
Yeah, sure.
One of the big arguments for the inadequacy of the current facility is that we have big trucks that plow that won't fit into bays.
Well, we will still have those big trucks regardless. We won't have maybe as many, but we will have big
but
trucks.
you're following my point. So I guess, to me, the sort of defining the mission would impact how large the facility would be, or what the needs of the facility would be. Because this is one of the things that I was struck when I read the Ty and Bond study recently, which was there was a lot of assumptions about what the needs were of DPW,
Right.
and in particular, increasing the number of square feet. I think it was like from
42,000.
27 to 42,000.
Right.
And see, I want to ask that question first. Do you really need 42,000? And to me, to basically say, okay, let's just keep doing what we're doing, but let's do it in a nicer building. To me, what I could see happening, we could spend $15 or $20 million, you know, by the end of the day, and you could have all of the same operational issues that we have today.
It's a different thing, though. The operational issues is something you take care
I know,
of.
but for the people in town, they could look at it and they said, wow, we spent all this extra money. And I'll give you an example of, I was at with a group of friends, and we were discussing this. Why are the soccer fields not mowed very well? You know, I could see us having exactly that question posed to us, and they'll say, why did we spend so much money if we're actually if everything looks pretty much the same? That's where the operational part of it, to me, is the number one.
That's not a relevant discussion. I mean, it really isn't. I mean, that's just like saying you expect with a brand new high school we're going to hire scorers. I mean, it doesn't, I know in your mind it may transcend, but it really doesn't. We're talking apples and oranges here. You're basically saying we've got a facility that was built in 1931. The town has increased in size 450% since that time. We have 100 miles of water lines, 91 miles of asphalt roads, 71 miles of sidewalk, 100 miles of drainage system. It's unbelievable how much larger our town is, and yet that facility was designed for a workforce of 1931 and a town sized at 24 miles. I mean, we should have done this 50 years ago. That's our problem. I understand your discussion, but I mean, we're so far past that point of the discussion. This should have been happening in 1987, and it didn't, because the can was kicked down the road. There is elements in here, in this study. The programming aspect of this study will size the facility out. I doubt very much, Alex, seriously, knowing what I do about A76 or contracting, I doubt very much if this town will ever embrace contracting main load type snow removal. They may do a little experimental with the schools. They'll do something that they can absolutely cover over if it fails. I don't think you'll see landscape, you may say landscape functions go up, but okay, so we take 600 or 800 foot of the shop and we say we can't use it, we use it for inside storage. I mean, these little elements are very small pieces of the whole puzzle. The core infrastructure is what we're lacking. And we don't have adequate shops for our people to work in or even work on the equipment. Or, our guys are on shift for 24 hours, and you saw where they sleep down there. They don't even have showers. I mean, they don't even have proper sanitation to get cleaned up and, try to get ready
But
for
how
another
is that
shift.
an argument against studying the operations?
Pardon?
How is that an argument against
It's not. It's not an argument against. It's that these things are automatically put in new DPW complexes now. They're a design feature that's put in to take care of what we say, creature comforts, because 1931, there was no such thing. They likely had 4 or 5 people working in DPW, if that. I think we only had 7 police officers in town in 1931. That was the whole force. I mean, I understand your point, but I think we are so far down the road from that for us not to take some positive action, to me, is irresponsible. I have to say it. That's what I think it is at this point. And I'm not saying we've got to do everything, but we must do something. We have to acknowledge to the residents of this town and to our employees that we care about this facility. We've got to do something with it. I mean, that's my plea. Okay, I'll take the flag off and put it on the table, okay? Paul?
We got our hand up.
No, I just wonder where we got the number 250. Is it a percentage of the?
Percentage of an estimate of what would the architecture and engineering fee would be based on industry standards.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, that'll get you to 30-40% design. So you would have a very good, you would have detailed cost, not 100% detail, but you would have budgeting cost estimates for everything. And schematic design. You would really get a feel of what that building was going to be like.
But can but it would first begin with looking at what the cost would be to prepare each of those properties for building, and then we would just pick one from there. So
that's right.
It's a process.
There'd be a site evaluation.
Okay, and then from there we would not be designing 2 buildings.
No.
Okay.
And the good thing about if you start out this way and you stay with one architectural and engineering firm is you keep everything on a better fast track. You don't keep changing and stopping. So it's very unwise to split these services up during this phase, because you could go through site survey, but your engineering firms are going to start over on half of the data.
I mean, the site analysis is essentially picking up where the task force left off from the 4 sites, looking at 2 to not get too unreasonable, too unwieldy of a scope. And like the task force, there are certain criteria that makes sites good for DPW facilities and sites not so good for DPW facilities. And the consultant, the firm that we're looking at will run through. They look at all 4 sites and say, these are the 2 you want to focus on, and focus on those 2, or just say these are the 2 are obvious and we want to work on these. But it'll select a site based on certain criteria, and then say, if this is the site, now let's design a building to fit, or partially design a building to fit in the site. And the only thing I'll say is there's no suggestion that by doing this, we're just not going to look at operations. I think I've thought I'd made it clear we've been looking at operations since the day after May town meeting, or annual town meeting, or was it last fall?
Last fall we talked about it.
Oh, it was last fall. So since that time, we've continued to do it. We've engaged the Collins Center. I mean, we are doing that. It just, as I said before, it takes longer. But no matter how the department operates, we do have water and sewer infrastructure that must function every day. We do have equipment that needs to roll to pick up branches, clear out inlets. I mean, there are core functions we have to do every single day. And the facility that we have is going to hit a point where it simply cannot support the operations, no matter how the operations look. And I think the thing that scares me on this is that I ask myself, where else, if for whatever reason something happens to the mechanics base where we repair our trucks, and we can't get trucks in there, outside wall collapses, and they're certainly in various states of disrepair. Are we going to want to put $150,000 or however much it's going to take to repair that building? Good money after bad. And then in the meantime, where are we going to go? Where are we going to take our trucks in town? to fix them. There's no place, and that's what scares me. How do we operate? If we don't do this, how do we operate? I mean, how do we operate not efficiently? Period. How do we get out the door? And this is long past due. And I am, when I was interviewed, this was a top priority. We just went through a goal-setting process, and this was the second most priority. I don't think this prevents you from doing anything else in terms of looking at outsourcing different functions or anything else. But to get a building going, you have to go through these steps. And if this is a priority for the select board, as it clearly was from your process, I think this is a modest request to get us down the line.
First of all, I just want to make sure everybody understands, we never voted on goals. We had a discussion, we ranked things, we really never voted and said, here's our goals for 2014-15. I would imagine this is the kind of article that Mark would feel possibly should go to the Springtown meeting as well. But, Rich, when we did that original vote not to rebuild at the current site, I don't think there was the second sentence that said, and there will be a warrant article for $250,000, and because I don't think that was ever part of the discussion. It was, do you build on that site or do you look at another site? And I don't think we've had that discussion, quite frankly, of are we going forward to look at another site? I don't. Maybe we have, and I missed it, and I could have fell asleep during that meeting. But the other thing, I think you told me that the average select board salary was $500 in 1931, inflation adjusted at $7,500, and I don't think we've kept. Sometimes things don't really go with things. I really think that there's a couple of reasons why I'm going to vote against this, because Article 17 was a citizen's petition submitted by Marie that will take money that is unidentified here out of the budget, about where that's coming from, and it's going to be, how much money, Paul, do we have in the current fire truck fund? Is it 360, 270?
375.
So we're talking, it's going to pull out 260, 280, 300,000, whatever that number ends up being for the particular twin truck.
325.
Okay, so there's a number there. We just put $250,000 in OPEB and said that was a priority. And now, if you do this, you're going to fall below the policy that the select board said $500,000 should go into stabilization. I just tell me, what's the policy? What's the priority? Is it the Quint truck? Is it the DPW facility? Is it OPEB? We haven't had that full discussion about. And to Alex's point from a couple meetings ago, throw it up on a wall. What's the priority? We have by this thing here, we have 7 different priorities. And we haven't put our finger on one and said, this is it. And the problem, and I know the board doesn't really care, is where's the money coming from? And that has never been discussed, never been identified. And look at the previous articles you just posted or supported, and look at it. The OPEB fund and the capital plan and the capital expenditures that we upped just takes another $500,000 out of the budget starting next year. Where's the money going to come for the bond for the DPW facility? And add it on. So I really think if the board wants to be true to the citizens, and Rich, it was built in 1931. I get it. But the board hasn't had a sensible discussion of where the funds are coming from. You just went back to the OPEB, which is on the first page or whatever, the second page, and no problem spending that money, knowing that $250,000 was coming down the road, and there's a Quint truck on there as well. So tell me where the money's coming from. We're going to bond it, I'm assuming. But none of that's in there. And again, have the discussion of what the real priorities are, make a decision to fund them, because this isn't the time and place on talking about a town meeting warrant. It's 10 o'clock, we've been at this for 3 hours, and this is the discussion of how we're phrasing what priorities are by voting on warrant articles. And I just, it's a bad process right now.
What kind of process would you have that's any better?
Well, Rick, pick something. We haven't had the discussion, said, here's the pool of money. No, quite frankly, everybody shot Alex down at the last meeting because he said, let's look at the big scope of this and where you're going to spend the money and what it's going to cost.
The board has known since 1987 that the facility was small.
And the board knew since 1987, and on Articles 6, we spent $250 some odd thousand to fund OPEB because we said It was a priority.
Right, there's multiple
No,
priorities.
but there's limited funding.
Well, sure, there's limited funding, but there's multiple priorities, Paul.
But there's limited
It's
funding.
the cost of doing business. You can't be.
No, that's not true. That's not true, because is OPEB, again, capital policy, OPEB policy is sucking $500,000 out of next year's budget.
Policy, they don't have to remove anything.
As Alex said, the presumptive in the budget, and he's absolutely right, the presumptive, they're in this year's budget, the increases that we're gonna work on. And they're, again, have the discussion. Is that policy more important than the DPW facility? We haven't had that discussion. Is it better to suck $500,000 out of the budget for OPEB and increase in capital planning than it is to fund DPW?
Those arguments don't have answers.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, they're just open. I mean,
No.
if I answer them, you throw up another set. And I answer them, you throw up another set. That just keeps going for eternity.
The easy way out is just to say we're going to spend without talking about it.
That's not true. You know, since 1987, you got a facility that's falling apart. It's now 2014. What year do you think the board needs to stand up to the responsibilities of executive leadership in this community and do something? I'm serious. We can't keep everything you said is true. Not a doggone thing you said is not true, but it is priority.
Then put the
and
finger
when
on
the
it.
devil is that facility going to be fixed as a priority for this community?
We're talking $500,000 a year in the budget that's going to be for capital and OPEB that's being sucked out. That we're not saying. So which one?
I wish I could get CPA funds to do DPW. It'd be easy then, wouldn't it? I could get $1,000 or $1 million in
You
here,
never get on the
but I
warrant.
can't. I don't have a Lancer pride. We're it right here. If the decision's not made with us, it doesn't get to the it doesn't get to the town meeting, and they can't make a decision. Stephen has said he's got engineering reports. He's got a nice $30,000 repair right now, and we can accept that as a new way. You just keep doing your studies, and we'll keep throwing money down the rat hole, because that is one way we can do it. We can literally waste money every year on a facility that's obsolete.
Listen, here's what I will say to you: is that take the vote because it'll pass 3-2.
We're just talking, Paul.
No, but I think, but there's no reason.
I have no idea what the vote is going to be.
Well, I'm sure they think it's been mentioned.
Can I ask Paul a question?
Yeah, sure. As long as you guys don't argue.
I'm surprised because when you were talking earlier about priorities, I thought good, because when we get here, this will be recognized as a priority, because when you gave your vision presentation, a linchpin of that plan that sets a whole bunch of other dominoes in place is moving the DPW. And I thought this is something you'll be able to get behind because we've said it's a priority. And the board didn't vote to say this is the slate of goals, but goals did emerge from some input from the board. And I honestly thought that you'd support this because it did come out as a priority. It certainly appeared to be a priority in the presentation you gave to the select board. Again, I don't think this is a huge ask. When you say where's the money going to come from, we are fortunate to have 1.69 million free cash. Now we have parceled it out a little bit ahead of this warrant, and I apologize for not connecting with Paul on this. I thought we had, but there are funds to be able to do this. And so when you say there are multiple priorities, what's the one priority? I don't think in public administration you can say there's only one priority. And if we put $1.69 million towards it, and I think that's why we're doing it a little bit at a time. I agree with you on the part of kind of going through it and setting priorities and sticking to them. I think both of you try to do it as chair. I mean, we've been a part of goal-setting sessions. We talked about last night for GFOA budget. I completely agree with that. But what I'm trying to get to with this article is, while that discussion is going on, the workplace for some of our most valuable employees is crumbling around them, and doing this needs to be done simply to sustain our existing operations, regardless of what else is a priority. Because honestly, if the building gets shut down because of workplace safety issues, or worse, the roof collapses or something like that, it's going to be a lot more expensive to deal with it at that time, if we haven't gotten down the road a little bit.
See, you said a key word. It's regardless of other issues. This board decided, though, to spend all that free cash. This board did, not you. So when you get down to this number, we just decided to spend that free cash. We decided to suck $500,000 out of the budget for other line items. And not, again, not you, this board did that with policies that were created. And I know policies are, as they say in the Pirates of the Caribbean, guidelines. You know, my favorite line there is that these are just guidelines. They're not really rules and
Pirates
laws.
of the Caribbean?
Yeah, it's a great line, if you got to watch the movie. They're just guidelines, you know, they're not really meant to be followed. Well, then why have them? Why suck $500,000 out of the budget directive when, and Stephen, this isn't directed at you, it's directed at the board. We have a citizen's petition that is going to take another $250,000 minimally out of funds to pay for a Quint truck if it passes. We have $250,000 here, we have $250,000 for OPEB, and it's citizens' money. And if the board decides that's a priority, then go back and revote all these things and make that the number one priority. I don't disagree. I disagree with how we're doing this, and that maybe if this were up first, it would have been funded first, and then everything else would have been argued about. But this is, that's my problem, is with the board spending the money unchecked and saying, well, it's not, OPEB's a priority now. I don't see OPEB as a priority over that building, but the board voted that way. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Al.
I just wanted to clarify, you were saying that we would spend $250,000 on this study, and then there would be what you called a design study
Right,
that
this-
costs $750 more?
No. $750 would be the total cost for all the design and your
Okay, so-
site evaluations and specs and everything.
So when would so am I thinking then,
If this phase was done, and it was done in a timely fashion, you could go to the Springtown meeting and ask for the rest of the design money.
which would be 500?
No, which would be,
We don't, I mean, the
yeah,
actual number will be
450.
generated by this process.
Yeah, actual number would be generated, but approximately. We're going on historically what the building should cost. And there's a massive variable on whether we go.
But I mean, I heard the number 750, and I'm just trying to figure out what that was.
That is an anticipated design cost. It's a
Which would
guesstimate.
include the 250.
It includes the 250, correct. And also, you may find out this facility to be downsized anyway. I mean, the study may have overlooked something, that there's been new efficiencies since the last study too, a new DPW. I mean, you could, and if they dual floor it, I mean, your footprint's shrinking.
So here's my question. So the operational overview, I mean, I'm just asking for where you stand, Richard. I mean, is that gone? I mean,
No.
Are we never going to do that?
No, it's not
I mean,
gone.
when are we going to do that?
I think what he was trying to do, and what we're trying to do, is talk to the Collins Center. We're trying to find a cheaper way to get it done, because it did fail at town meeting. The operations evaluation is going to have to take place sooner or later. It has to, but what Stephen is doing, he's interjecting small pieces of change
to
right
me,
now.
if I might, to me, that's the immediate thing. I mean, like, one of the things that we encountered last year, I mean, just like a basic thing, one of our residents, alerted us, they saw trucks at Frigo's in East Long Meadow.
Mm-hmm.
Clear. There's no reason for Long Meadow trucks being East Long Meadow. The concern was sort of blown off at first, and then it came up again, and then, I guess we kind of have to, I guess it's real. I mean, to me, like, that's a sort of day in, day out, operational problem.
Operations evaluation would not clear that up. That's an internal problem. That's something you clear up internally.
It depends on what you mean by the study.
Right.
I mean, like I've seen management consultant studies that have addressed that very point.
Well, what
I mean,
vote on that article?
I mean,
Yeah.
How did you vote on it? Do you remember how you voted on that at town meeting?
I think I voted for it.
The study would get in and show whether they have the policies in effect to prevent what you're talking about. Do they have an abusive vehicle policy?
But again, it depends on the consult. I mean, I've seen management consultants who get right down to, this person or this group of people are not doing their jobs.
Well, and yeah.
I mean, that's the sort of, so something as simple as, hey, why do we have trucks going into East Long Meadow?
Right.
I mean, and so to me,
Hold on.
that's what's kind of critical.
Right. It is critical. I'm not saying it's not.
And so that's why I'm surprised that it's not here. And to me, something like that could have immediate payoffs.
Well,
imagine if something like that, that could have immediate. I mean, this is a long range thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about a wall falling down. I mean, under any set of circumstances, you know, this is not going to immediately, you know, hatch a new DPW facility.
Right.
So, I don't know, I'm still sort of, I'm actually very surprised that you and Marie.
Would you like to add that study to this warrant article?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, would you support it?
Yeah, if you add the study, I mean, that's just more packaging in it. That's what, $25,000-$30,000, and you've got your whole study.
Yeah, make it 280, add the study.
No, I mean,
sure.
seriously, I mean, we're not
If it
even
fails
being.
a town meeting because it's
Yeah.
in there, and we don't get to provide, we don't get to make the repairs that have to be made, I mean, sorry, Marie.
My point is that there were issues about this high school. They were saying the tiles were falling off the roof, they were going to hit the kids. No one sat down and said, we really should analyze on if we have adequate teaching staff, we should see how IT is going to decrease our teaching staff, what we need in space. None of that was said. We said we need a new building. I understand there could be some dovetailing issues. I don't think they go together completely. There are two issues that we need to deal with, and right now we are in crisis, a serious crisis down there. A crisis on multi-dimensions, and not just for our employees. We're in a floodplain. We're up to the 100-year mark. We are skating on thin ice down there, and I think this is really important. And at this point, I'd like to call the question.
Unless we have a flood in the winter, and then we're not on thin ice.
No, that's
No, we have pretty
well.
good
Even
ice.
then, it might be
Richard,
thin
can I just
ice.
respond? The fact that we've been 100 years, that those are unrelated events. So,
But it's been a while since we've had a flood.
So we could have a flood next year. The
Yes.
chances of the flood, that doesn't mean you get another 100 years. These are. You have to
Then, okay, you
understand.
could call it climate change. You could call it
Well, they
right down the
statistically
river.
can come 5 of
We're-
them in 1 year.
Right, exactly. I mean, the
It's
fact that we
not-
haven't had them
Okay.
or
Right.
not has no bearing on.
But
the
it's not
frequency of
safe
it.
for us to be sitting in a floodplain with our essential department sitting down there with chemicals sitting down there right next to the river with all sorts of things. And when we went to an October 11 storm, they had no electricity, they had no communication. Someone had to bring in a generator from home. This is our essential responders. We have police, fire, DPW, as they tell you during that storm, was absolutely essential, and they had to work so hard just to be able to function. I think it is an emergency. I think we have to put this in a priority, and I'd like to call the vote.
Okay, we're also, for edification, we're likely 2 years to 3 years out from this
It'll take
point
a while.
if we approve this to go forward.
I'm also open to adding the $15,000 back for the GPS that you took out if you don't want the trucks to go to Frigos anymore. If you want to add that
Well,
to
but-
one too, I'm into that.
But you've also pointed out that we can't use that.
Yes, we can.
Right, that's another, we don't want to add that. Don't muddy the water. Okay. Marie, you said call the question. I guess legally it takes a 2/3 vote, but we usually don't have all that stuff. Is everybody through with discussion? Everybody's through discussion, okay. All in favor? Wow. All opposed? I am shocked.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to move that we adjust Article 5, which is the allocation of free cash into the reserve fund by adjusting the number to $696,857 in order to stay within our policy of a $500,000 free cash minimum.
Is there a second?
I'm sorry, what was the number?
It would be 696,857.
He's taking the 250 out of the 946.
Okay.
Thank you.
Go back into
Okay.
Article 18.
I was going to suggest that. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, second.
696.
Was the Article 15?
It's Article 5, that.
Article 5.
She said.
And you were changing it to what, Mark?
696,857, that would leave us, Mr. Sturzik, I assume that would leave us then with at the $500,000 free cash flow, which is amazing because originally this was 650 and now we're going to we're going pretty
No.
close back, we're going a little higher still, at 696.
We had a second, we had discussion? Yes, Paul.
Can you just tell the public why you're doing that?
Yeah, I think that our free cash gives the town, if you will, a fund to draw on should things happen during the year that will allow us to have better accessibility to the fund. The reserve fund takes 2/3 vote, but free cash doesn't. Either case takes a vote of town meeting, but it's a little bit less burdensome to take money out of free cash than it is to take it out of the reserve fund. And it's in keeping with our policy of having a $500,000 free cash level.
Any other discussion? Call for a vote. All in favor? All opposed? Any other business? There was one other item I thought I would mention. We had talked about the shops. I have had conversations with Steve, and he is prepared.
Who's Steve?
Yeah,
Walker.
Steve Walker.
Okay.
He is prepared to come back before the board and update you on all of the traffic plans and all that have been designed in, if there's a desire for them to come before the board. Is there a desire?
For suggestion, I would entertain that after the planning board has their vote.
Okay.
And see what happens with that.
Okay. So we could conceivably have him in here, Stephen, I guess, so what, November 3rd, is it?
November 3rd would be the regular meeting after the
Planning
Planning
board
board votes, yeah.
And we have this one other issue which we did not seal that was open, the one warrant article.
Yes.
Okay. So is it the pleasure of the board, you'd like him to come in?
What's the purpose? I mean,
Well,
we don't have to endorse it.
I know, I think he feels compelled to show you what they've done on the final design on the traffic, and also to tell you what repairs and all that they've done, I guess, to the ventilator systems and all that over at Max's and that kind of stuff. I guess there has been some work that's happened behind the scenes that the board has not been apprised of. I also told him, why don't he encapsulate that work and send it to each board member as an individual?
Yeah, I mean,
Just let them know what's been going on.
my personal opinion is that we've shown that our time at these meetings is fairly valuable, and you know, communications, I can read, I can look at PowerPoints. You know, there is no decision to be made out of it. I see no reason to have them here where there's no decision to be made out of it.
Okay.
My personal opinion, others may think differently.
I'd like to see what the planning board does first, so.
Okay.
Can I, because this came up, because they asked to make a presentation at the Council on Aging, and I haven't really given them an answer yet because I wanted to wait and see what the planning board said as well, but sometime before town meeting. And the thought, and it didn't feel right, but at the same time, because normally you want, you know, the precedent at the senior center for presentations like this was if there's a political issue, you bring in someone that has the opposite view. There really is no opposite view on this. It's status quo. How the ground exists today is the opposite view. But in my thought process, for whatever it's worth, I thought, but in our form of government, especially since this is an article not generated by the select board, we have some responsibility to provide the people who are sponsoring articles the opportunity to educate the public in the best possible way in advance of town meeting. And so I agree with you. I think presenting to the board is a waste of time as far as the board's opinions are concerned. But it does give the public the chance to see the presentation at the select board meeting because they are televised. So it wouldn't be, I guess I'd look at it's not for you, it's for them. But again, I do agree with you. We run out of time in these meetings, and so I'm not sure what to do other than wait till after I think
That's what the town meeting's for. I mean, they can also use time at town meeting. I'm not predisposed to giving any political side anywhere town time and town facilities to push one side or the other, whether I'm for it or against it.
It's an article, but it's not really political.
It's an issue that's up for vote by the town legislators. It's up for vote.
So why don't we see what the planning board does, and then we'll make a determination at that point. I mean, we'll reconsider anyway. We'll just come out and we'll solicit opinions.
Because their meeting's on the 29th, ours is on the
29th,
3rd.
right. Okay, I think we're done. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Absolutely. Thank you very much, folks. We had an excellent meeting. We got through quicker than we thought we would.
Richard?